It is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021, 6 p.m. This Board of Commissioners special workshop is called to order. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Hendricks.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Price.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Dowser.
Present.
Is there any public comment tonight for anything that is not on our agenda? Yes, sir.
Ray Kerr, 583 Johns Pass Avenue, Madeira Beach. I was requesting a update on our no-wake zone. We haven't heard anything in the last few months. Last we heard, it was forwarded up to the FWC. Didn't know if we had any reply back. Any update would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do we have any emails on public comment?
Not for general, one on the liveaboards.
Okay, thank you. Next up for discussion is an update on the derelict vessel.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to add two things. I promise they're topical, and they just kind of came to fruition here in the last couple of days. So, and they shouldn't be long topics. One is our beach chair agreement out on our beach, on our 9th ranked beach in the United States, and the other one is the Public Works Director position. If it pleases the board, I'd like to add these to our workshops this evening. I don't think they'll take long.
What was the first one? Beach share?
The beach chair agreement, yeah.
Beach chair agreement?
Yes.
I don't even know what that is, so.
It's our concession with saltwater destination.
Oh, beach chairs. Okay, well,
Hard with the
it'd
map.
be nice to have the agreement or something to look at beforehand.
Well, yeah, it has
We can
nothing to do with the
prepared.
agreement. Yeah, it's
Okay.
just kind of an overall comment on it.
Okay,
Okay.
beach chair and the other one.
Public Works Director position.
Okay, that will be H and I. Okay. First on discussion is update on the derelict vessel agreement with Pinellas County and the Sheriff's Department. Deputy Ficacello, is that correct? And City Manager Daniels?
Ficacelli, sir.
I'm sorry.
Good evening. Status of the derelict vessel situation as it pertains to Madeira Beach. Obviously, you guys have seen the result of Hurricane Ada washed up several vessels into the shallow water, into the mangroves, into the rocks, and up against the seawall. We follow the Florida state statute in dealing with and eventually removing each one of those vessels. I can tell you I'm personally responsible for the area to the south of Tom Stewart Causeway. I believe at least 3 of the vessels over there are some of the reason that I was called here today. I can tell you each one of those 3 vessels that's currently up against the seawall has had a derelict vessel investigation opened on it, and that investigation has led me to forward charges to the state attorney's office to have the owners held responsible and ultimately to have the vessels removed. However, I cannot legally have the vessels removed until the court case is closed and I have a disposition. It would not be legal or ethical for me to remove a key piece of evidence in a criminal proceeding. So that's the reason the vessels are still there, and I can tell you my investigative portion of the process has concluded, and the state attorney's office has those cases. There are several others that follow that same pattern up in the mangroves, further to the east. There's a vessel in the mangroves that's been there since around early 2018. I still haven't gotten a disposition on it. There's been, I think we're up to 9 pretrial hearings. I haven't gotten a disposition, I can't remove the vessel. I would like it, to draw a clear delineation, however, between those vessels, the ones that have been declared derelict through a derelict vessel investigation, and the liveaboards and unattended vessels out in the waters of Madeira Beach. There are individuals who live aboard their vessels out there in Madeira Beach and are doing so lawfully. I have no means to tell them to move or remove their vessels. Even the unattended vessels. It has to meet the statutory requirement for me to have any means to pursue any kind of criminal action against them. I do have a uniform boating citation that I can use if they're at risk of becoming derelict, but again, there's very strict criteria outlaid in the language of that statute.
Excuse me, Deputy, may I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
You did mention that the boats would be removed. Now, is the city going to be responsible for that, for the removal of these boats? Or would it be the owner of the boats themselves?
No, ma'am. Just as before, with all the other vessels that I've had removed from the waters in Madeira Beach, the state has a program. They have a contractor. I contact actually the county water and navigation. He contacts the county's contractor, and the vessel is removed. One of the reasons for the entire criminal proceeding is to hold the owner accountable so that the state gets restitution for the monies spent removing the vessel. So that's the best possible outcome and the one that I work diligently to achieve. Unfortunately, it's not always possible to achieve that. There are vessels out there that show up overnight and are unnumbered and predate HIN plates, and I'm unable to track down an owner, and unfortunately the state has to absorb the cost of removing that vessel. And I have at least one of those cases pending right now that's already up for removal, and I'm sure hasn't even come across the desk of anyone here, because it goes to the county and the state.
Thank you.
So do most of those vessels that are out there, are they registered? Are they current registrations?
They run the gamut. There is a precedent set in the statute that your vessel can be federally numbered or documented, as it's commonly referred to. Many of the vessel owners out there choose to have their vessels documented rather than an FL number displayed on the side of their vessel. However, due to the COVID crisis that we're currently experiencing, FDLE has relaxed some of its timelines for the period of time, the grace period that you have to get your paperwork in order, so to speak, for a new purchase of a vessel, and that grace period has extended some extra leeway for some of the occupants out there.
I know it's a long, slow process, and a lot of people think you can just go grab a boat that's sunk and drag it out of the water, but it's just not that simple.
It's most certainly not, and I can assure you that I work diligently on all of these vessels. I have multiple databases that I use to keep up with them. I partner with FWC, I partner with the state, I partner with the county to maintain accountability in every facet of the liveaboard and derelict vessel situation throughout the entire county. This is by no means the only problem area. It's just a problem that we don't have a solid solution for at the current moment, I would say.
So it's basically out of the city's hands as far as being able to do anything on those boats over there.
Unfortunately, as it currently sits, I think it's out of both of our hands. Like I said, I have multiple cases with the state attorney's office right now waiting for a disposition, and until I get a guilty verdict, I can't proceed any further.
No. We just wanted something to be able to go back to our residents with that are asking these questions.
I certainly understand. The only peace of mind that I can give you is, like I said, that the work is being done. We are pushing forward, and as soon as the courts re-engage with misdemeanor trials and start filtering out some of these cases that have kind of bottlenecked, then we'll start to see results again.
Deputy, I just have two really quick questions for you. Number one, are people living on the derelict boats? I mean, they're not supposed to be living on those then, right?
So that's kind of a gray area. So the vessel technically belongs to the vessel owner. Throughout the course of my derelict vessel investigation, one of the key components is proving that this vessel definitely belongs to this individual. We give them a grace period to bring their vessel into compliance, to remove the elements of the crime of derelict vessel, and then at the conclusion of that amount of time, which is again extended because of COVID, then we charge them criminally. To say that I can keep someone from their residence without a criminal conviction in the courts is just going further than I'm comfortable going as just a law enforcement officer. I'm not a judge. I don't sign people out of their residence. You know, the Fourth Amendment protects your right to your residence in a way that I can't breach.
Now, I don't know if you've heard what happened at the school. Bob, has he been filled in on that? Okay. Whose jurisdiction is that if they're going to the bathroom in front of children when they're out on the fields and taunting them for wearing masks and things like that? Is that your jurisdiction? Is that our police's jurisdiction? And I mean, we need to I don't know if this has been relayed to the.
Yeah, we did. We looked into it. That actually occurred back in November.
Okay.
The school resource officer was telling us, and it really started with the kids taunting guys on the vessel. But it is our deputies, and they are aware of the fact that this has happened. So they've been doing extra patrol. I'm not even sure if you're aware of it or not.
I'm not completely familiar with all the details that you were just outlining there, but it sounds like if that's an accurate depiction of what's happening, then certainly give us a call to the sheriff's office. There's numerous other things involved there that have nothing to do with derelict vessel. I mean, if an adult is that close to a school and acting inappropriately, it'll be handled.
No problem.
Like
They just reached out to me. Now they can contact Bob directly, so we're good to go. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And I have a few questions or comments. There's several sailboats that appear to be in Madeira Beach waters, right off of the Madeira Beach Yacht Club out here. And from what I understand, our Madeira Beach ordinance says that they must be registered and they have a limited time in our waters. Who is enforcing that?
When you say registered, are you referring to registered with the
Registered
city?
here with our, and received, we have an ordinance here in Madeira Beach.
Right.
Are you familiar with that?
I'm very familiar with that.
Okay.
Yes. I was in all of those meetings as well.
Okay.
I can tell you that the sheriff's office. I'm not a lawyer. I never went to law school. I don't write or interpret ordinances or state law. The sheriff's office has a general counsel's office that takes care of that kind of thing for us, and they have put us in a holding pattern, so to speak, as it pertains to all cities and their ordinances involving live-aboard vessels.
Do you know why that is?
I'm not prepared to speak for the general counsel's office of the sheriff's office.
If I may, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's definitions that deal with the liveaboards.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Do we know if the three boats out here close by, if they run under, or if they are under the definition of liveaboards as it exists right now? I know one of them claims, or we understand one of them may not be considered a liveaboard, even though they appear to be living aboard it and out here for months, but that's okay. What about the other two? Do they?
About the other two, are they under their own,
I believe at least one, the one that was most recently a problem over there was, aground and listed over, and we, at least had a derelict vessel case open on that. I believe he may have come into compliance, so that case may have been closed once he came into compliance. That particular case was not mine, however, last I checked on it, I believe he came into compliance. So while I don't think he lives on that boat, dealing with people as we do through the derelict vessel statute and the at-risk statute, we were able to get him to bring his vessel into compliance. As far as it being anchored in the city of Madeira Beach, like I said, the city ordinance is not something that we are utilizing at this time.
And just to be clear to everyone out there that's sending me emails about this, this is because the county or the state has decided not to enforce the local ordinances regarding liveaboards?
I believe there is enough question as to the legality of those ordinances that we are still assessing whether enforcement is going to be possible. I cannot speak to what stage of that or how it's been interpreted. That's well beyond my scope.
Okay. And you said other cities are having the same problem?
Yes, ma'am. A number of other cities, not only within Pinellas County, but throughout the state of Florida.
That is so interesting to me because I know all through the Florida Keys, you cannot just anchor your boat and live there. You must be on a mooring ball, or you must be registered, or you must move. So I don't know how they get away with it, and we can't write a statute up here that gets enforced, but we need to definitely look into that.
Yeah, City Manager Daniels or Attorney Trask, can y'all get with the Sheriff's Department's counsel and see what we need to do on this?
Find out.
If there's anything we need to do to correct our ordinance, if there's anything out of the ordinary that they say we can't do, let's work towards getting it right so that it can be enforced.
I know there also is some legislation that they're presenting in Tallahassee. I think the bill's already been filed, having to deal with, the need to permit liveaboards. Although I think the time frame that they're looking at is a year-long permit, not our time frame of being 72 hours. But I haven't had time today to research it. I just found out this morning, so I'll be researching it and I'll pass that along to Tom as well. But if we can do something with our ordinance, obviously that's that's something that we need to do. And I'll get with Tom and we'll work it out with the county. And also I reached out to our lobbyist, but I haven't returned his phone call yet to see about what's going on in Tallahassee. If when you're done, I just have a couple questions for the deputy. So
I'm totally done. Thank you very much.
I'm done.
Just if you can pass along for me too on the criminal cases that you have, if you can get me the case numbers and so forth, a list of the cases, and I can see what I can do about pushing the state attorney's office along. Or is this just a COVID situation where they're not doing anything until the COVID situation gets better?
My understanding is that misdemeanor criminal cases right now are at a bare minimum to be optimistic. So I don't foresee them running any of these cases right now, but again, I don't want to speak for anybody over at the courthouse or...
No, I understand. Well, if you don't mind just forwarding me that information, I'd appreciate it. If you can check to see if that case was in fact closed. I know it was not in your area, being right off the rec center here, but if you can do me that favor and just get back with me and let me know. And
certainly.
If it's still open, if there's a case number on it too, I'd like to try to track it.
Not a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming, Deputy.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item?
On boats where you can't identify an owner to go after them criminally.
Tom, can I ask that you state your name?
Tom Edwards, protected address. do you ever seek civil action against them?
I don't seek criminal action against anyone. I work strictly criminal law. That's the scope of
No, I
my
got
law
that, but
If a vessel is declared derelict and a vessel owner can't be found and held accountable, the vessel's still removed, the state and the county absorb that cost.
okay, but does the county go through a civil action on that or criminal action? Because obviously, if they can't name a person,
If
they
there's
can't
no
go
one to
criminal.
hold accountable, then there's no one to hold accountable, civilly or criminally.
But you're still gonna need a court order to remove it, aren't you?
Once I complete my investigation and show due diligence that I have met all the criteria that I need to meet, and no owner has come forward, I forward it to the county, city, or, county water and nav, and they contract with our contractor based on my, police report, and they have the vessel removed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I do have one written one, too.
My name's Mike Sambuco. We're over on Bay Point Drive, and we've had people try living in the basin behind.
Your address, please, sir?
Excuse me?
Your address?
Oh, 829 Bay Point Drive.
Thank you.
And there's a boat behind our house now, and they're obviously not going anywhere. We've had it before, and then over in the other basins, over by where the, like the 7-Eleven stuff is, I see boats in there all the time. And none of them ever use the pump out facilities. We never see any of them ever move. So they're just dumping into our waters, and we're stuck, you know, looking at this and living with this. We're the taxpayers, and we feel like with our rights, we got nothing, and they can just do whatever they want. That's just how we feel as, you know, citizens. But.
Thank you. That's exactly why we wanted a pump-out boat a number of years ago and had a grant to get one that was turned down. Anyone else?
I would say to your point, sir, that there's a common misconception that if a boat doesn't move, it's automatically not pumping out. Many of these vessels, the liveaboards especially, have holding tanks on board. However, the majority of the people who live on board these vessels don't want to deal with the upkeep and maintenance of those holding tanks, and they elect to use either what's commonly referred to as a wag bag or a marine toilet that they can bring on their small boats, their dinghy, their tender, whatever, and take over to the Madeira Beach marina and dispose of their waste that way. So just because the vessel doesn't move doesn't mean that marine sanitation is definitely being handled in the way that you fear it is.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay.
Mayor, I do have one submitted comment.
Okay.
This comment is from Jennifer Hartman, 359 Medallion Boulevard, Madeira Beach. I am concerned that the liveaboard boats anchored in our waterways will continue to multiply, causing adverse effects to the environment as well as the potential property damage and value. We have seen how boaters have organizations who legally back their rights, but who protects the taxpayer homeowner rights? Will the city seriously take on this agenda and contact appropriate action? It's not that I'm against boaters and their desire to live on their vessels. It is how can we work together to create laws and regulations and policies to keep our waters clean and protect our rights as tax-paying homeowners. A few years ago, we had 9 boats anchored off our main pier and seawall. We had several storms come through, and 2 boats came loose and ended up at the rocks on the northwest side of Tom Stewart Causeway, coming dangerously close to our main pier and private docks and boats. If this current situation is not resolved, we'll have the same view of dozens of boats anchored in our waters. The view I see when looking to the southeast side of the Madeira Beach Fundamental School, which hosts a multitude of sunken, abandoned boats, is the view I am dreading to see off our seawalls here at Madeira Beach Yacht Club condos. I attended a city hall meeting a few years back in which I heard a local realtor say it was only a matter of time before property values are diminished.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I do want to say these times for public comments are just that. They're public comments. They are not question and answer sessions for the people that have come up to speak or the commission. They're strictly for your comments. Next is amendment to Code of Ordinances, appointing of Planning Commission members. Director Portell.
Good evening. Many months ago, we were talking about the composition of the Planning Commission and then the work that they have to do over time with the update of the comprehensive plan and analysis of some very complex development review activities. And I made the point that most of the time an organization will have some kind of criteria to try to make sure they have at least a few people on that commission with some background in land of some sort, real estate, architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, development of some kind. And at this point, we have just open appointment for the Planning Commission here, and sometimes that leaves them a little bit under stress because they don't get enough input from each other on details. Now, right now, we do have people on the board that have background in forms of construction and real estate, and it's really handy. But what we talked about at the time was coming back, looking at the ordinance and see about listing out some kind of credentials that you would be looking for. Now, in a small community, you can't always assure you're going to get a whole list of people with criteria, but it would give you something to help in evaluating what kind of input people would make of the candidates who were presented. So the commission had told me to come back with some recommendations on the language, and that is what's before you to discuss to see if you're interested in our going forward with that in ordinance form.
Yes. I liked your additions. I like the idea that we are focusing on trying to get people with that experience, and the first time I read your memo, I agreed with it, so this is fine with me.
I agree. I think it's something we need to push ahead with. We do need people with a general knowledge of the zoning and planning board and even the Civil Service Commission. I think we need to look at people that have some background that can benefit the city.
I agree, Linda, with what you have down here, but I do have a question. For some of the professions that you have listed, I mean, stop and you look at, like civil engineer and urban planner, I mean, these are people who probably already have regular jobs too. So it might be hard to connect some of these people to these positions since they already have outside work.
Well, and as you know, urban planners work a lot of nights anyway, but yeah, in other places, people do full-time jobs and still work on those planning commissions, and it's actually good for people who have career aspirations anyway, because that kind of public service and exposure to regulatory process and government often provides them with a springboard into, usually it's the commission, and to getting involved in the community in a political way, and understanding process and everything. So actually some, people do look for the opportunity here. I'm surprised at how often people come to ask me questions about something that's going on and tell me, I'm retired now, but I was this or this or this. You've got a lot of people in town who aren't involved. We see the same ones over and over, but there's a lot of people who aren't involved who have really valuable professional experience in their background, and maybe not only putting it here in the ordinance, but we could do a little more social media and to advertise how we're encouraging that in the city, and we want these people to come forward and give their time back to the community and all that experience they've got stored up.
I agree with you, and I do believe we probably get some very good candidates. But I was just concerned with some of the jobs listed, thinking that they probably already have other things that keep them busy. But putting someone in that position with that type of education or that type of work style, I think would be great for the planning board. You can ask Mr. Noble, he'll tell you that, you know, I'm sure he would appreciate it also to have people on the board who knew what they're talking about.
Right.
It sure would make things a whole lot.
And Mr. Noble's a good example. I mean, he's got a lot of that kind of background, and it's really helpful when he can provide the leadership in that area, just in procedures even, of understanding what it means if you create a regulation that affects these areas. How do you enforce that, or, you know, how do you bring that about within the planning process? So.
Linda, just a quick question. You're not planning on writing any requirements for us up here, are you? Because I gotta be honest with you, as a Slurpee slinger, I don't think I qualify for much of anything, but I'm good with this. I mean, as long as we're able, I mean, we could get applications and nobody has any of this experience, so that kind of puts us in a hole, but as long as we have flexibility with that, I'm good with this. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, I guess we go forward with the first reading as soon as we can, right?
We'll get in there and write something up. I'll work with the attorney.
We've already prepared the ordinance.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of suggested changes to it. One specifically with regard to the qualifications. There could be a situation where you don't have a quorum on the board because you have, in fact, you know, people resigning or people moving, and so I would suggest that we add some language that says whenever possible, these requirements should be met. So in case that situation and we can't find anybody, that our board just does not shut down, you could still appoint someone else, but whenever possible, you would try to get them with these types of skill sets. And so I've added a couple of words, but we've already prepared the ordinance, and it's ready to move on, subject to your direction.
Okay. Do we have alternates on there?
No, not on the planning commission. I don't think you're allowed to have alternates. It doesn't call for that at all.
Okay. I'm fine with moving forward with the language change.
Yep.
So, okay. Is there any public comment on this? Next is RFP 20-10 athletic field lighting. Director Hatch, welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. It appears we're absent a memo for this, so I'm going to walk through the one that I wrote, and then I have a couple supporting documents that were included as well. On November 12th of 2020, the city issued a proposal, RFP for athletic field lighting. We received 4 proposals on December 18th, 2020. They were evaluated on the following criteria. We had 40% cost for projected services, 20% product support and monitoring and controls, 20% life cycle cost, and 10% experience other installations, and 10% on warranty. The attachments, you have 3 of those are the scoring sheets for that. And I did attach the RFP comparison, cost comparison, and that was one of the ones I'm going to walk you guys through just for transparency's sake. And as far as these go, and as you guys have heard from me a couple of times, the RFP process, we provide a list of what we want provided, and then we get it back, and then we have to grade on the information provided. So we did so with the information provided. I wasn't able to sit and call each of these companies and ask questions and clarifications and all that stuff. Rather than try to fight through all that and potentially throw out all the bids because they're missing one little thing, my thought, and I did have discussions with our procurement attorney, basically, we'll, upon approval, enter negotiations with the rankings as they go and work our way down. If we don't get an agreement with the first one, then I'll go to the second one and continue down the line. The evaluation committee determined, based upon these proposals, in order 1, 2, and 3 was, number 1 was NGU/Ephesus, number 2 was MGA Construction, and number 3 was Himes Electric. Of the 3, the second 2, MGA Construction and Himes Electric, essentially provided identical product. Really, the difference in cost boiled down to the installation. And so I will go to, if you guys have the RFP cost comparison, which is the Excel sheet. If you go to the top part, I utilize this portion of the spreadsheet to calculate the percentage of savings for the electric alone with the lights. So if you look at that, NGU, the top one was a 61.75%, and excuse me, this was if, we're expecting a lifetime cost of 25 years with LED lighting. So as it stands right now, we are looking to replace these bulbs every 3 to 5 years with a cost of somewhere between $5 to $7 grand, depending on the equipment and the number of lights that we have to get up there. So if we were to do that every 5 to 7 years for the next 25 years, it adds up. So to give you guys an idea, the electric cost of 1,800 hours, and again, this was an error on my part in the RFP, was we didn't give a specified calculation for what they wanted. So what we did is we created this spreadsheet and put them all on a level playing field. So this is 1,800 hours worth of lights with the current lights, and then with NGU, Qualite, Hines, and MGA, and then I did the fixtures, the number based on the output, and we calculated them all the same. This is a fixed electric cost that, again, that'll change, go up and down throughout the years. So we're looking at, with NGU, it would be a 61.75% savings on the electric currently. With Himes and MGA, we had identical at 55.37%. And then the Qualite, which is not one of the three that recommended, is at a 41.95%. The second line, which, and again, this is for the transparency portion, if you look at that first line where maintenance costs are listed, the current, we estimated $50,000 worth of maintenance costs over the next 25 years. NGU provided a 10-year warranty, and then beyond that 10-year warranty, because I asked for full lifetime costs, they provided a $60,000 ballpark number potentially for maintenance costs. The other three companies, Qualite was a 25-year warranty, and then the other two provided a 10-year estimated savings and did not provide the next 15 years. So I provided the numbers that were provided, and I couldn't estimate I could have easily put 50,000 or 60,000 for the other two companies, but again, that wouldn't have been a true estimate. So provided the numbers. With that number in there for NGU and no maintenance costs for the other two companies, the projected savings number actually flips, and that puts MGA as would be the projected savings, the 31.15%, the most of the three.
Right.
But that doesn't include a projected maintenance cost. So if I were to take the NGU maintenance cost that they just threw out there for the sake of the proposal, it would flip again. So I went off the electric projected savings for this ranking, just to give you guys a heads up. That said, we do have $330,000 budgeted in the current budget fiscal year, and the proposed amount that I received from NGU was $350 plus the 17.5 contingency. That said, I have no plans of moving forward with the project unless I can get that number under the budgeted number. And that's where, based on the scoring, I was hoping to negotiate with them first, and if we can't get it there, then the second one we already know is there. And looking at currently, we're able to turn the lights on field 1, 2, and 3 separately. That's what Himes and MGA both offer. The NGU control system allows me to turn on an individual light bulb, dim the lights. It gives me more control for projected potential more energy savings. So there's still stuff within the proposal that, regardless of who I talk to, we're going to have to work out even further to make sure that everything is truly there and that they're meeting the needs. Because I want this, who knows how long I'll work here. This project has to outlast me and my staff. So that's our true goal. So if you guys are comfortable with it, that we would open up the conversation with NGU and see where we can go. And I'm not going to bring anything back unless I'm below that 330 number anyway. So this could be the last time we talk about it with them. You never know. But I just wanted to get the feeling from you all.
You've looked at possible grants for this, haven't you, Jay?
Yes, sir. One grant that we are looking at is Visit St. Pete Clearwater does what is it? It's a capital funding grant, but it is a reimbursement grant. So they wouldn't give us the money until the project's done anyway, and that goes every 2 years. It is up in I think it opens up in October. So my goal is if we have this project completed by then I would be able to, essentially, I would have to prove how these lights would allow us to play more games and get more heads in beds for tourism. And we are in a geographical area that has not received that grant in the county for quite some time, Madeira Beach ever. So it is definitely a priority once we get this completed.
Do you know how much that grant is? Or does it vary depending on the project?
They've funded 100% of projects. I can't guarantee that, but the portion of the grant that I was going to apply for is 100% coverage, as long as we can prove it. You know, that's the tough part, but that's why we're here. So, you know, looking at that, regardless of these three, you know, again, wherever we land, you're looking at energy savings, like I said, 61%, 55%, and we're currently budgeted about $40,000 a year for electric just for the ball fields. So 60% of that, you're looking at, you know, or looking at this. So 40,000, we're looking at a $17,000 to $20,000 expenditure versus 40
saving
every year, and better control, and that's the big thing. You know, we're still getting phone calls that the lights are on too late, that kind of stuff. We've got them on timers that we've duct taped together essentially, but you know, it's working for the most part. But occasionally power goes out and resets everything, and then we get the phone calls. So these are much smarter systems, and you know, it's got the savings built in. So.
Well, I'm good with you going ahead and working with NGU, see if you can get that price down a little bit and get moving forward for me.
Well, and for the sake of conversation, there are three companies.
Yeah.
So it's NGU, MGA, and then Himes.
Yeah.
If it weren't, you know, just for the sake of conversation, if it didn't work out with NGU, I mean, MGA and Himes are offering the same product, so it would probably stop there anyway. So.
Okay. Now, they don't offer the ability to turn off individual lights.
Within their bid, there was a specific portion that mentioned an additional controller, and that would be part of the discussion. I'd have to, again, so that was
as of right now, that's an upcharge with them.
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
Nope. No, this project's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah. Yep.
Way before, I mean, what I was still doing back there, and, you know, we had lights over at the school field, and I would get a call at 9 o'clock at night in bed that somebody left on. I'd have to get out of bed and go, I mean, crazy stuff. But we've been working on this project for a while. I think it'll also help us with the glare off the water that we've gotten some complaints around about over the years. So, yeah, this is terrific. Good work, Jay.
Thank you.
I think also too, it helps us with our goal going towards a carbon neutral environment too. So when we look how it all fits in with what we want to do in the future, especially with our comp plan and so forth, I think it definitely is an important project.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this?
How y'all doing? My name's Thad Hamilton, and I'm representing the MGA Constructors. We prepared and submitted a proposal for the city of Madeira, RFP 2010, athletic field lighting. We provided the lowest cost proposal for this project. Our bid amount of $303,714 is $46,286 lower than the evaluated highest ranking bidder. We provided a letter to Mr. Hatch with detailed items that are not minor but major in the point evaluations. We understand that the city attorney has advised Mr. Hatch the option of not responding to our items that we pointed out. We understand that Mr. Hatch deems these items as missing minor details. The major missing items are, first, NGU soccer overlay, page 8 of the RFP. Item B, D, in the scope of work requires the bidder to provide lighting for a soccer overlay. Both Musco and Qualite provided a soccer overlay. NGU FCIS's lighting design, and that's on pages 23 and 25 of the submittal, clearly does not include the soccer field. Lighting the soccer field overlay would require lighting at an additional 55,000 to 74,000 square feet, depending on how you size the soccer field. Lighting the additional area for the soccer overlay will require additional fixtures. NGU FCIS did not meet the scope of work as specified, and this is not a minor issue, this is a major design issue. NGU pole locations. On field 3, the pole locations of the NGU design are not correct, and this is also pages 23 and 25 of the submittals. They have located the outfield poles in the middle of the soccer field. Both Musco and Qualite had correct pole locations. Bidders had an opportunity to verify pole locations on site. Moving the poles back to their actual locations will require additional fixtures. NGU FCIS did not meet the scope of work as specified. This also is not a minor issue. This is a major design change. Also, last, the pole height. Addendum sent out to us, number 2, indicates pole heights are 60-foot mounting height. Lighting designs submitted by NGU are using 70-foot mounting height poles. Lower right corner of pages 23 and 25 of submittals. Of the 23 grid points provided on their off-site spill scan, and this is also page 25 of submittals, 7 grid points, which is 30%, are right at 5-foot candle required in the, or I'm sorry, 0.5 foot candle required in the specification. 8 grid points are at 0.4 foot candles. Lowering the mounting height of the poles may not only impact the fixture counts to light the fields, but it would certainly negatively impact the spill and glare control because the aiming angles are more horizontal. NGU FCIS did not meet the scope of work here either. It's not a minor issue, it's a major design issue. We listed many other issues, but due to the time, we're only referring to the major issues that violates our proposal as not only the lowest bid price, but clearly the highest ranking bidder. We just ask you guys to reconsider your choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment on this? Yes.
Mayor, council members, staff, my name is Tim Imhoff with Musco Lighting, selected by 2 of the manufacturers, which is MGA Contractors and Himes Electric. For the past 31 years, I've had the opportunity to represent them. Again, as we are the selected product from MGA, and as already mentioned, the lowest bid, and I believe they're second on the list in reference to points provided. On August 14th, 2018, the City of Madeira Beach adopted a resolution that reads as such: the city also wishes to find alternative lighting systems to eliminate the light pollution and glare that are adversely affecting the properties adjacent to the city municipal sports complex. And I think I heard that a little bit ago about the water, or the lights skipping off the water. This is a great first step. It is an important one, as LED provides many different values for the city of Madeira Beach. However, with LED sports lighting, there's one challenge, and that's glare. LED has many, many values, but glare is one that seems to be a culprit. So how do we resolve this issue? How do we solve this problem? Well, it's easy. It's easy done. International Dark Skies, IDA, in 2018 and 19, released a program called Community-Friendly Outdoor Sports Lighting. This third-party team of experts will assure this board and the local residents that off-site glare and spillage will be controlled, and when the lights come on, everyone, including the board, staff, and the residents, will be happy. I wanted to share with you that Musco Lighting meets that criteria from IDA. IDA is a company that for the last 33 years deals specifically with sky glow, glare, off-site light spillage. The benefit to the city of Madeira Beach, it will not cost you anything to add this potential component criteria to this project. Simply stated, the IDA provides the manufacturers that we give to the end users this report. Did it pass or did it fail? And at the end of the project, there's a post reading where their team of PhD lighting experts come in to verify for you and the residences that all of those criteria are met. This particular project has severe, in my 31 years, severe glare and spill controls. I would say take the salespeople, take the manufacturers out of the middle of this. Turn it over to the experts, IDA. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there any emails on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next is Pinellas County School Board Joint Use Agreement. Director Hatch.
Good evening again. Almost forgot that one. So the Pinellas County School Board, every 5 years. So every 5 years, we sign an agreement essentially with the Pinellas County School Board that we have joint use of the school field facilities as well as the park, I always forget the park located on the water there. Essentially, it's just, it's an agreement that upon request, we can utilize the facilities. We use the school field for soccer, other activities, potentially parking for events, that kind of thing. And then the park itself is actually maintained by us, so it's something that we have access to call a park. Within that agreement, it's if there are anything, the indoor use of facilities or anything else that we need, there is an annual cost for that. Like if we were going to use their basketball courts, it's a $1,500 rental for the basketball league that we run. But if we are going to use it for a quick meeting because this isn't working, we already have the agreement in place that we can skip going through the whole process. I can just, one of us can reach out to Mr. Ateek and make it happen. So essentially, they are looking to renew this with us as long as we're looking to renew it with them. If we don't use any facilities and they don't use any facilities, there's no cost at all. It's just we have an agreement that says we're working together. Again, there's only certain facilities that cause a charge. And my time here, and Doug, I don't know if you can speak before I arrived, I don't think that the school has used our facilities at any point for anything. Maybe a meeting once or twice, but nothing to the point that affects this agreement. So, something that is in the agreement, any use of the park, or use of the park is fine, but if we are looking to make any sort of changes or anything else, it allows us to reach out to them and get approval to do so. But otherwise, it's utilizing facilities under the current conditions they're in, and there's no cost to either side unless there's a staff or a hard cost involved, so.
So there's no cost in using the soccer field
Correct. I mean, we maintain the field, but they let us use it, so that's essentially our agreement. So if there are no changes to this, they're just looking for an email from me that says no changes. They'll change the date, send it back to us, and we'll sign it at the next meeting.
Looks good to me.
When you say park, are you referring to Bicentennial?
Yes.
The dog park? Okay.
Brain wasn't working there.
Who maintains the road to that park? You notice
park's
it's
the
getting
school.
wider and wider and wider as we avoid going to.
I think it's a county road, actually, yeah, because
Is it even a
I remember
road?
when they were putting in that pipe, 5 years ago, the county was out there, the county takes care of that road and maintains that
County
road all the way up, yeah, it's a county
Or maybe
road.
even state, I was gonna say, for access to the bridge.
Yeah, I was only, well, the meeting I went to was in Clearwater, no, yeah, it could be,
Yeah.
But
either one.
it's not Madeira Beach anyhow.
Okay.
Yeah, well, there was one minor change, and I forgot it was on here. It does say that the outside board facilities may be used by the city during the city's seafood festival. So essentially, they're saying it's okay for us to use the field for parking.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask them change it to, the city may use it during city special events. So it doesn't limit us just to Seafood Fest. So if we get to a point where King of the Beach or anybody else needs to use it for parking. Other than that, I mean, it really is straightforward. We'll look into the DOT thing. I mean, if it's just putting some dirt in the holes, then maybe we can.
Mm-hmm.
It might need more than that.
I really just dumbed it down, I didn't mean to, but,
Yeah, that'd be a good change on special events.
And might I add, this was a very well-written agreement. Do you have any idea who wrote this?
I can double check. Yeah.
Me and Mr. Trask wrote this.
Yeah.
Yes, back in 2016, yes.
There you go. All righty, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Is there any public comment on this? Any emails on it? City manager?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks. Next is, update on defining accessory structures and hedges. Director Portel, your turn again. We're going to get you a high-top stool for the...
Hello again. We have a couple of, actually three, items on the agenda tonight that were discussion items for you. And these are things that have come up over the course of the last few months, and you've sent us back to look at what your options are, and also just to give you some time to kind of think through what your concerns on these issues were. Because even when you have had conversations on them individually, you have still been kind of unsure about what your sense for the future is for the community. These are design issues. It's about what you, as a group, want to define the community's character to be over time. And we have reached the point in our planning growth here that we're undertaking an amendment to the comp plan, and following on that, or concurrent to that, we need to take an even more aggressive approach to dealing with some of these ordinance conflicts we have in dealing with how people use their property. And it may be that after you've thought it through, you decide to kind of stick with what you have, but it is definitely time to start talking about it. Some of that is because, as you've mentioned, it's very difficult for us to enforce the code if the language is not clear. And some of the language that's in your code has been there since the code was adopted. Your first zoning code went into effect in 1964, and it looks as if it was taken from some other place, a more suburban style place somewhere north of here with different kind of growth patterns and not on the water. So at that point, actually a good portion of the city's fabric was already determined. The housing patterns, subdivision, everything were already in place. You have smaller lots than a lot of other places. And so the ordinances that were put over top of the existing city didn't really mesh with it. It didn't match it. And because of that, we have nonconformance all over town. So houses that were already there and whole neighborhoods that already existed were made nonconforming to the zoning code due to no fault of their own. And that was never really adjusted. So since I've been here, I've been bringing regular changes to you for the code. Because of everything we had going on and the number of people, initially just me, doing all of this, we, you'd only spread so far. We have been taking on the issues that were really critical. You know, as I got here and started doing development review and realized some of this just plain didn't work. Some made it impossible to develop certain lots, which is why they're still open, corner lots, for instance. So we've been bringing things through the commission a little bit at a time, but we now really need to start going into some of these day-to-day crises and the things that interface with code enforcement and create most problems and questions here. One of the things was the accessory structures. We have an accessory is something that's secondary and incidental to the principal use. And that's a definition that's really set in planning and in land use law. And it's something I'm sure that Mr. Trask hears over and over again, the difference between a secondary or an accessory unit and a principal unit on the property. And I think it's important to note that because, consistency and definition protects us in interpretation over time. And one person locally had come in and asked you to redefine what was secondary and basically allow anything that was a structure to be principal on the lot. Well, that would mean that you could put all of these things on a piece of property without even having a house there. So you could have neighborhoods with a hodgepodge of different kind of developments on them. And that would provide a lot of flexibility to individual property owners, but it would not protect the existing property owners, and also the value of the neighborhoods and the character of the neighborhoods, which is your primary defined goal in comprehensive planning and in zoning. So we allow a variety of accessory developments and structures, but one of the things that comes up regularly is people want to put out like tiki huts. We've had one person come in who was cited because they had actually built an entire kitchen out in the backyard, a 10 by 10 fixed kitchen with a stove and fans and ceiling and the whole bit out in the backyard, which of course is not an accessory use. It was outside the building area. It could have been in addition to the house if it had been attached to the house, but it wasn't. And we get a lot of requests for that kind of thing. Most people check first and don't put things in if we let them know it doesn't meet the standards. But sometimes they don't, and some people just don't bother checking because they don't want to hear the answer. Now, there are ways that we can get around that. People do put some things in their yards that they can pick up or dismantle and put them away during a storm, put them in the garages, the ones that aren't supposed to be filled in underneath the houses where they're supposed to have storage space. But we do still get people building things out in the backyard. And their neighbors do complain. So that is something that you do need to be aware of. We allow two like sheds or accessory actual structures in the backyard at a time. That doesn't apply to garden type fixtures on the water. Anything that's not an official accessory structure, those fixtures are supposed to be 36 inches or lower. That's the way the code reads, and it's consistent with how things are spaced in a lot of waterfront communities. But there is one inconsistency there. We say that you can have fixtures associated with a pool and a pool deck up to 36 inches high, but if you don't have the pool and you have just the deck, the ordinance doesn't let you have the fixtures. So that's a bit of a inconsistency in terms of right and privilege on individual lots, and something we'd like to address. People can put a deck in with a fixed grill or something like that. If you can do it on the water, or if you have a pool, you ought to be able to do it without the pool. So those kind of inconsistencies we've been making note of and want to come back fixing that to make it fair for everyone. There are, however, limitations. We recently had someone install 8 to 10 large columns, like 10-foot columns, around and about in the backyard, which is inconsistent with the code. And that was the one that finally came as a complaint to you, because we had gone to code enforcement with that one. And it's really unusual situations. So, I recommend against changing the entire code for one person nobody else has ever done anything like that. Nobody else has asked for that. And the reason we even knew to enforce it was the neighbors were already complaining. So that will probably come back at some point. It's the reason we started talking about accessories and definitions. So in your packet, I had presented you with some definitions, portions of the definitions section, in case you just wanted to refer to that. And would like to get your opinion on accessories as we use them now. For instance, the two sheds or other accessories can be 8 by 10 by 8 feet tall. And of course, anything built in the city has to be anchored, and we ensure that there are flood vents even in the sheds. There are some inconsistencies between that and other portions of the code. For instance, you can have two sheds side by side in the building area in your backyard if you're on the water, but in that same space, you can't have a 6-foot-high fence. And I'll get to that in a minute, but it doesn't make any sense if you can put up an 8-foot-tall shed, why you can't put up a 6-foot fence within that space is a little confusing to people. Also in that space, you can have a 35 to 40-foot house. So I came before, you'll remember, Commissioner Hodges, that came before talking about why we can't have a 6-foot fence, but you can have a 40-foot house. So we'll get to that in a minute, but wanted to make sure that you didn't have any specific concerns about accessories, the way we implement them now, or if you had specific things you wanted us to look at or changes you thought that should be made, and how much time you've had to think that through since we were here last.
Well, now the fence can
We'll get to that.
Yeah, well, I was getting to the accessories, talking about the fence. The fence can be 4 feet high, correct, in the backyard?
Yes, and on a waterfront lot, the fence can be 4 foot high if it's an open fence, and there are specifications about what constitutes openness there. Otherwise, it would be, if it's solid, it's 3 foot. Now, if you have a pool, you have to have 4 foot, so it can be a maximum and a minimum of 4 on a waterfront lot with a pool.
I was just wondering, because that 4 feet, what I was getting at is that 4 foot height. I would think that would also go for other structures that you've got back there.
Well, right now, the way it reads, that solid type structures and plantings, for instance, the hedge, a wall, or a fence can be 3 foot high past the building line to the water in a waterfront lot, unless it's an open fence in which it can be another foot higher. So all solid things can be 3 foot high. And we do allow people to come in and do a solid fence or a wall and then put 1 foot of open gating or fencing along the top of that. That doesn't work very well with pool yards, because if you can put your foot up on the wall and use it to step over, then you've created a hazard. That doesn't meet the building code safety for pools, but in non-pool yards, that works for people.
So shouldn't it be consistent between the two?
In terms of,
in terms of what a non-pool yard can do?
Well, what happens is that stepping situation is there to prevent people using it to get children to get into the pool yard.
Right on.
And so it's in the building code, it's not in our code. We could certainly change our code to make sure that it's consistent throughout.
Yeah, I think it would just eliminate problems if we had consistency throughout the ordinance, so that.
Well, wait a minute. Now you're saying basically we can't have chain link fences.
I didn't say that at all.
Well, if you say that houses without pools have to adhere to the same requirements as houses with pools, that's what you're saying?
No. I'm saying that a house without a pool, if a house with a pool has to have a 4-foot fence, why does a house without a pool have to have a 3-foot fence?
Well, the house without a pool can have a floor fence. They can have a 4-foot fence.
Yes, but it's got to be open at least the top.
Either of them would have to be open.
Because it's not there anymore, but my house was built in '53, and I've been there 35 years, and when I moved in there, there was a 4-foot chain link fence.
Yes.
Running down to the seawall.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's allowed.
Because it's open?
Yes.
Okay.
The one thing I don't understand, Linda, is you're saying someone could put a shed on a property line that is 8 foot tall?
Yes.
They can't I didn't think we could have sheds on property lines.
Well, they set off a little bit. Usually they set off about 2 feet from the property line. The issue is that along your property line, your 6-foot privacy fence has to drop at the back wall of your house because of the way the code defines yard. It ties the drop in the fence height to the yard instead of to the building line. And what I had proposed when I came before was that the 6-foot fence be allowed to go to the building setback line instead of the back wall of the house, because Some people put their houses all the way up to the building line, so they're able to put their full 40-foot house in that space. But those whose houses are set further back, especially the older, smaller houses that are set back, they can't use that same space for a privacy fence. So it seemed a little bit of an inconsistency between the amount of yard that one family could have as privacy, set as private space, and what another family could. And there's a bit of a diagram, and it didn't come out in color, unfortunately, in yours, but there's a diagram in that material that I gave you. I printed out some slides. I started on page 40, and I have to apologize because on the very first slide, there's actually 2 misspellings.
Oh.
That's an all-time record, I think.
Yeah.
I blame that on working too late.
The diagrams, I didn't see diagrams in here.
It's not so much, it is further back. It's on page 43, I think,
43?
of your packet, 43 of 92.
Nope, no diagrams.
44.
Oh, I see, okay.
While we're on this subject, I wonder if we need to kind of look at setbacks in so many of these small yards.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if 35 feet is,
Yeah,
not reasonable in this day and age.
the really long ones are in the R1 district, and we don't have many small yards out in the R1. The R2, it's very difficult in some places because, the buildings were already built closer than that. Often they're, sometimes the house is non-conforming for setbacks in all 4 directions in the really small yards.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
and if you look at square footage though, I mean, you've got some backyards that are on 90-foot lots, but you've got some that are on 60-foot lots or 50-foot lots.
Yeah, we even have a
So
couple
that makes a
40
big
by
difference
40.
on what you can do in your backyard. That's why I was wondering if that's something we should probably address.
Yeah, I would recommend it. Yeah, I think we need something that works a little more flexibly and is based on more the character of the neighborhood or patterns of neighborhoods. It's more performance-based. We do need a minimal setback, obviously, because people need to be able to get between houses for service, and also there's, a separation that's just safety for overhangs and roofs and things. But I would like to get to that where we look at the setbacks, especially in the R2 districts.
Yeah, and I'm talking more, not necessarily on the side, but probably more so from the, like on waterfront property, from the seawall to to the house. Like, maybe we need to look at 25 feet rather than 35 feet because a lot of these lots just don't have the room.
Mm-hmm. That's something we could bring back and look at. That's very much part of the urban pattern that you would deciding on. And I could bring it back with some analysis on, what percentage of the properties even have that and how many are affected by the setbacks and how long it looks like the problems have been going on based on development patterns and history.
Yeah, and that brings up the hedges that we've been talking about. On one street alone that I know of, there are about 20 houses that are in violation, including the city of Madeira Beach itself.
Sure. I know at one point, and Commissioner Hodges may remember, I brought in a diagram showing one of the R2 districts, and I think it was 70% non-conforming out of a neighborhood based on
My neighborhood.
probably front setbacks. And some, like I said, were actually non-conforming in all 4 sides. And we have very small lots in some areas, especially those interior lots, very small. Now, you don't want to, set your standards just for the unusual situation, but it would be worthwhile looking at that to see what it's really doing. Sometime in the past, I had brought back changes to the setbacks on corner lots because we had language in the code that required you to set back 20 feet on the front, but then 20 feet on the side, creating two front setbacks on a corner lot. And we've got 40-foot lots. There wasn't anything left. So you probably noticed there are a lot of corner lots sitting around that were undeveloped, and they just couldn't put anything on them. So we changed that one, and then also changed the setbacks for townhouse-type developments and in some of the middle development, mid-range development neighborhood areas. So been trying to deal with that, but that's a good thing to look at.
So do you think it's doable to set, see, I'm looking at your diagram.
It helps in color.
Yeah, but, you seem to be, I don't want to say arguing, but you seem to be presenting that we should not be using the,
backyard.
I don't know what you call it, the building line
Right.
as the beginning of the backyard or something. But with these weird lots, how are we going to convert that to feet?
Well, what I was going to suggest is that if you're able to put your 6-foot fence along your house, all the way to the house, then it should be able to go to that same spot all the way down the block for other people, even if their house doesn't go that far. So it's the building setback line I was suggesting you could use.
Okay, exactly.
And actually, the whole city had been built that way for many years, and I think Mr. Trask will remember that became an issue actually about 3 years ago, the definition of yard, and they hadn't been using the yard. They had been using the building setback, and so all over town, hundreds, because at one point I counted them area-wise, hundreds and hundreds of houses have their fences at 6 foot all the way to their building setback line. So now when they come in and they want to repair the fence, and I tell them, well, the last 2 panels have to come down to 4 feet, they just decide to leave the dilapidated thing up because they don't want to lose those last couple panels.
Yeah.
And it really did create hundreds of nonconformities. And so what I was proposing is that we just allow everybody to get 6 feet to the same line, just make it even across, so that on this diagram, that hash line that runs across the center horizontally on the page, that would be the line to which everybody could, in this diagram, could put their 6-foot fence, and it would be the same for everyone. So whether they have their 40-foot house on that line, or they've got their shed sitting there, or they have a 6-foot fence, it's an even building area.
And is that, I mean, as houses get replaced, as quickly happening all over this,
right,
probably due to the flood, but as houses are getting knocked down and being replaced, it could never be forward of that red line. Is that what you're, because of the building codes, and therefore,
well,
I don't want that line to keep moving.
No, the line hasn't moved. What's happened is that people are building much bigger houses than they used to. And this is a town of small houses, and especially in the older areas, there are weekend cottages that are not intended to be lived in all the time, and things have just grown organically. Yeah. But what you're seeing here is that the newer houses are bigger, and they're building them all the way to the building line in the back. Right. Whereas the older houses are still set back from the water further. And so that's as far as they can go, but eventually, if everything to rebuild, they would almost all be lined up on that. All the houses will be in the same place, because they take up every bit of square feet that they can on the lot.
Sure.
So if we change it, right now it's 35 feet, right?
It's different depending on whether it's R1 or R2. It's 35 in R1 and 25 in R2.
I'm just wondering if we should make it consistent 25 throughout the city, but,
I'll bring you some maps and let you look to see what difference that would make. In a lot of places, people have already built out there. Yeah.
Well, now we're just building bigger homes.
Yeah, they will.
Well, that's,
homes.
Yeah. More ad valorem taxes.
The other issue in that section was on hedges, and what had happened is that our code defines a hedge, and I did put the definitions there, highlighted them in yellow. It defines a hedge as effectively being a line of shrubs, and then it defines shrubs as a multi-stalked woody plant, which we don't have as many of here as they do in New England, somewhere where this was written. So what happens is we have more tropical type material here, and it's not technically shrub as defined here. It is used as shrubs and as hedges, but it wasn't defined that way. So the Sheriff's Department, our code enforcement people have said they were unable to enforce the hedge regulations. And this is a really hot topic. People are complaining constantly that their neighbor's hedge is too tall and it's, blocking or closing everything in, or that it's lopping over onto their side. Of course, they can cut it if it's on their side, but this is a constant point of battle between neighbors here. And I don't pretend that coming up with a consistent and easily used definition is going to resolve that conflict, but at least from our point, we would know what we were supposed to be enforcing. And that would be a big help to the sheriff's office or whoever's doing our code enforcement. So what I had done was gone around the country reading hedge material and ordinances from all over the place and tried to come up with a all-encompassing definition based on what everybody was doing to try to head off all of the controversy and conflict. And that is what I had proposed in the ordinance when it came up to you. Since then, however, you've also been talking about this hedge issue on your own and just the landscaping issue. In Florida we have a lot of very tall palms in various kinds that people would use as borders along their property. And you were concerned that we were that was what was being enforced, a 3-foot hedge, and that maybe people should be allowed to have taller hedges, and that was more in keeping with the tropical climate and just the general direction that people seem to have gone over the years in landscaping. And admittedly, there is a lot of that. And the commissioners, over time, I hear you complaining about, well, that ordinance wasn't enforced here, so why is it being enforced in this spot? Well, we don't run around in people's backyards. We can't do that. So if a neighbor complains, then we enforce on the hedge. And that's the way a lot of code enforcement goes, especially in a small town where you don't have a full, force of code enforcement out there all the time rolling around looking for violations. We do respond in large part to people turning each other in and complaints. So yeah, there are a lot of people who've never been complained about that we wouldn't know. Their backyard has lots of tall plants, and they may have been cultivating those for years, because the code does say that hedges or anything acting as a hedge, we would interpret that to mean, is supposed to be only 3 feet tall in the backyard. Those ordinances were adopted not only here, but all over the county. I checked the various sea-based communities here, and that's really common, that everybody was designed to bring the fences and anything else down in the backyard on the water to keep that open view. Now, nobody has a right to the view across anybody else's property, so there's no way for us to enforce or assure that, but this is definitely something that I think was conflicting for you and that we needed to talk about. Before we come forward with this hedge definition, if we need to go back and do something differently, if you think hedges should have a different dimension, this would be a good time to begin talking about that and make suggestions.
I do think hedges or plant material needs to be treated differently than fences. And I think we finally did agree that everyone's view is straight out, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do we really want to make people cut their foliage down the same as if it were a fence? I don't think we do. I think people will be putting up thick palm trees instead of fences if we allow them to let them grow.
Well, palm trees are allowed to grow as tall as they need to grow, even right on the property line, and a hedge is a solid row of something, which is what
Some of those palm trees are solid.
Yes, they are.
That's
the lower ones are, and that's the issue, yeah.
So is there a way that we can devise an ordinance that allows, green material to grow tall all the way to the water line and not be considered a fence, right? Because I think that's where the problem was. If hedges are lumped in along with fences, then if we have to treat fences the same as hedges, that's where we have the problem, and that's where no one's compliant. But if we allow people to put plant material higher, I would be okay with that, as opposed to treating the plant material the same as a wall or a fence.
Yeah, actually, hedges, if you're keeping them at a certain height, it's a more formal look.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a casual area. And the tropical vegetation is much different than you would have north of here. The hedges, a lot of the hedges that I see are just, birds of paradise and lady palms and stuff like this, and, that are basically trees, really. They just grow thickly, but they're not something that you can keep trimmed down to 3 or 4 feet high. They're not made to be in a formal-looking environment. They're in a tropical, casual environment, and I think that's something we need to consider is where we are. We're in the tropics, basically. That's just my thought.
So when we define hedge, let's not lump in a wall with it or a fence with it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And make them two different. Hey, if it's a fence, we can talk about if it's chain link fence, you can have it 4 foot all the way to the water. If it's a solid fence, you got to drop it down and do 3 foot. But if it's natural material, you can let it grow. Is that a possible solution to all this? I mean, you do have neighbors turning in neighbors and bitter, feuds going on over what's growing all the way to the water line or what fence or wall is all the way to the water line.
Does it even need to be 3 feet to be a solid fence, or can it be 4 feet and be a solid fence?
I think fences are fine. I think the fences and the walls are fine the way they are. If you put up a big plastic wall between your house and my house, I want it to drop down before the water. I think what we have is fine. And if it's a chain link fence, it can be a foot higher. But I think we need to allow the foliage that people want to put up and not require the foliage to run through that same, because as it is right now, that's what, we're all out of compliance, or a whole lot of people are out of compliance because their foliage is taller than the 3 foot. So if we allow greenery to grow and just treat like a man-made fence or wall differently than a hedge, I think we can solve the problem. Now, is everyone gonna run out and put in plants? Yeah, but that doesn't give me heartburn. If we have all agreed that your view is out your back, right, and you don't have...
Yeah, if I look in either direction, I look at boat lifts with boats on them.
Yeah. I don't know, would that help part of the solution for people?
I think people are gonna argue anyway, but it would define directly what code enforcement is supposed to enforce. Would you want any height associated with it, or just let it go?
Hey, when I moved in my house, my neighbor had a massive tree, right? I loved it. I was very sad.
Well, trees don't count anyway.
I mean, it blocked everything, but it was great.
Yeah, trees are okay anyway, but we do have provisions in the code that require anybody to keep their yards in proper order. Upkeep is an issue. Yeah. You can still complain because things have gone wild and aren't being properly maintained.
Well, someone's gonna put bamboo up there, and that's gonna be the end of it, right? We're gonna have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want someone putting up bamboo just because it grows like crazy and is super tall.
We'll have the happy amendment, no bamboo.
Well, I see it out of control in a lot of places, so. And there's non-spreading bamboo out there. I mean,
The clump just keeps growing.
I do think there needs to, I mean, do we let somebody's bamboo get 30 feet tall all the way to the water line? Are we okay with that as a city? I don't know. I don't want to be the only one talking about it, so.
Well,
Go ahead.
you know, you make attempts not to over-regulate too. I don't know, is that their right to have bamboo 30 feet tall if they want it? I guess it's a tree.
But it's also a solid wall. It's not really a tree.
It's actually a grass.
Is
Yeah,
it?
it is a grass.
Okay, there you go. You gotta have your lawn mowed.
All grasses must be loaded with.
So what you're doing this evening, you're just trying to put a catalog together, basically,
Right.
to put down the items that are required, let's say, on property.
Yeah, bring you back some amendments, but actually you've brought all these issues up at your own meetings, so.
Yep.
It was the opportunity to give me some more specific direction and to really compare your concerns to what's happening in the city. If you want us to change the ordinances, then I'll bring you something, and you can always decide on the details when it gets here if it doesn't fit.
You know, sit and look at it and just
Yes.
draw a circle around it or something, you know, just something to go with, an idea of some kind.
And I'll bring you some background too on things like the setbacks and the impacts, maybe some comparisons to what other communities have done. You know, I like to give you extra paper.
Also with that accessory building stuff.
Yeah, that'll be.
Because that is very squishy, isn't it? I mean, you can't list everything, but do we, I mean.
There's a lot of things specifically listed, just as an example, you know, as examples. It's in the code. I'll bring that out so that you know, if you got a chance to read.
I've read it, and that was part of the problem when that first came up with the house with the columns, is I read our statute, and then it sent me somewhere else to look as a definition for this, and then it sent me somewhere else to look for a definition. There were,
I think it was,
didn't flow, there were conflicts, and I couldn't figure it out, so I was wondering how our residents figured it out, or.
I don't know that there was actually that much conflict as was presented to you. The material you got did not come from us. Some of it wasn't even from our code, and so it was conflicting because it didn't actually come from all the same place. You know, the definitions of what is a structure, what's accessory, and what's principal structure, things like that. A lot of those definitions come out of the building code. We have no authority over that. It's the same definitions used throughout the country. And it's to our benefit if we stick with those definitions and we don't have to use them, you know, or we don't have to allow those things, but changing definitions that are used as an industry standard just makes it more complex for us later to defend. But we can talk about all that in detail. We can bring you lots of examples. I don't think the accessory thing is not defined at a strict list of all that is accessory, but it's supposed to be incidental too. A lot of people put things in their yard, and as long as it's properly sized and placed and anchored, in this case, if necessary, then it's just accessory use. You know, you get dog houses and kids' playhouses and all kinds of things that can go in a yard.
And are those considered accessory?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those have to be the setback and.
Yeah, there are exceptions for things like dog houses and play sets and things.
Maybe chicken
coops. And yes, chicken coops.
Yes.
Swings.
Yeah, there are exceptions for things like swings and playhouses and things that they don't have to have the same setbacks.
Yeah, Seminole built tiki huts.
No, well, the Cheekies, those have to be built for the purposes those are designed, you know, they're for their use as a cheeky, not as an example of a way to get around the code. That's a legal issue. Mr. Trask might want to address a little, we can bring that back to you too, and then the explanations on how that works. Because some people, people come in all the time with a design of something that said is designed by a Seminole they know, and so they get to put it anywhere. That's not how it's not how the law works.
Yeah. If you're living on the reservation maybe, or on Seminole land, you have that right, but not here.
We have that conversation
Oh, so
regularly.
people have that notion? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
With the building code as well, they can't have any electric or water or anything into a cheeky hut, so it's very specific on the uses for it.
And they're usually trying to use it as a bar.
Yeah.
They're real intent, yeah.
Okay, so what direction are we going to give Linda?
Linda's gonna put together some kind of a form for us to take a look at and get an idea from, and maybe go from there with what she has in mind.
Bring you some examples, maybe some samples you can choose from, and piece together something specifically that suits you.
Did we decide it's okay for greenery to be right up to the water line and not be treated as a fence, for instance? Because I was the only one that talked on that. I just want to make it easier for her to figure out what to do, because...
That would be helpful.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm okay with a fence being up to 4 feet, period. If they want it 3 feet, they can make it 3 feet. But, I mean, if you can have greenery there, then why can't it be solid if they want it up to 4 feet? I mean, you can still, if you're sitting in a chair, you can see over a 4-foot fence, unless you're laying down on a lounge getting sun. I'm asleep when I'm doing that anyhow. So, and we can keep it like we've got it. Commissioner Price, if you prefer that, the open fence at 4 feet or solid 3 and...
That doesn't, but we can just keep it the same. I mean, we've all lived with that drop down for so long. I think that's kind of normal, isn't it, in coastal cities or cities on the water? I think everyone kind of expects that at this point.
Well, I was just trying to standardize to where there's no question, this is what you can have. This is it, period. You can have up to 4 feet, doesn't matter whether it's solid or chain link, open or whatever.
That wouldn't bother me.
Because odds are they're going to plant a hedge along there just to dress it up anyhow.
So we want privacy, it's kind of our, we don't want a privacy thing.
That's good for me, if that's good for everybody else. Doug, you got anything? Anyone else? Okay.
I'm done. Public comment.
Linda, I think that's got us. Thank you, ma'am. I think we've got some public comment on this.
I was just standing here because I know I have the next item.
Okay. You don't have to answer questions now, though.
Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore Drive, Madeira Beach. First, I like your idea of making it 25 feet, period, throughout. It's not, like on my street, there's apartments, there's, not supposed to be because it's R1, but there's apartments, there's regular houses. You go around the corner, just 3 houses, then it becomes apartments. It just kind of, so it changes. If it was 25 feet all the way around, it would be, throughout, it would simplify things a little bit. And the other thing is, I think that when a lot of these beach communities evolved. People had houses, there wasn't a lot of growth, and they could see a whole lot. And people had docks, and their boats actually floated in the water, so you could see over the docks, so you could see over the boats back in the 50s. So the idea of a clear view worked well with the fences and the hedges and all that stuff. But now, if you go out on the intercoastal and you have a house on the intercoastal, you look down one way and you look down the other way, unless you get on the very end of your dock, you're not going to see the water, because all you're going to see is boats, because they're up in the air. So your view is blocked in that aspect. And with Commissioner Price's comment, is most of the views that people have is behind their homes to the back, not to the side and to the sides. So I think over time, because of changes in like boat lifts and how things have grown over time, that idea of a clear view has changed. So with an ordinance that keeps that in mind, it makes it a little bit easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray?
Ray Kerr, 583 Johns Pass Avenue, Madeira Beach. I don't know what the procedure is, but it sounds like a policy such as this really needs a lot of input from people that have moved here for the water view. Some value privacy, some value that view. It's hard for anyone on the board to specifically say, well, you know, because they only can reflect from their own backyard, basically. So where one view may not be as great, you know, it might be more important. So I don't know what the procedure is to put this on a referendum for the next time we have a vote, but to actually get votes from the community. Just a thought.
Thank you. Anyone else? City Manager, do you have anything on this?
No, sir.
Okay. Next is short-term rental processes, violations, and fines. Director Portell.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I believe that this was an item that was put on at the request of a commissioner, and I am mostly here to answer questions if I can, and to give you some history of what's been going on here in terms of the application of fines or maintenance of the list, or just general implementation of the policy.
And it was myself that asked to have this put on the workshop, because I'm getting more and more calls from citizens about non-compliance with our vacation rental ordinance, and when people do get caught renting their single-family homes in the middle of a neighborhood to 12 people that make a lot of noise and party, they get very small fines. So what I did on page 58 and 59 of the packet is I kind of just condensed the part that was concerning to me, and I thought if we could just talk about the offenses and violations. Basically, we say that if you're not compliant with the statute, we'll see what we are able to do within the limits of the law. So, and apparently a special master is called in that doesn't give very heavy fines, and I've got people saying to me that there's houses being rented for $300 a night for 7, 8 nights, different people coming in every couple of weeks. And so when they get a $93 fine, they don't care. And we are not stopping it. So I don't know what we need to do, or if we are even able to beef up the violations or the enforcement of this. We have our own deputies don't know what our statute says, because our statute says that even advertising your home for short-term rental when it's not grandfathered in is a violation. And we're not enforcing that. There's all sorts of advertisements on all sorts of different websites, not just Airbnb, but, houses with, rental houses that allow dogs and all these different ones. They're all popping up now. Madeira Beach is all over those things. And neighbors complain about it, and deputies come take a look, and sometimes people are there, sometimes they're not there, and we're not pursuing it. And I don't want to live next door to a spring break house. So if I live in an R1 or an R2, and they're renting it for less than 3 months or 6 months, depending on where you are, and you're not grandfathered in, I think we need to put some teeth into our enforcement and into our remedies, because it's not happening now. I mean, I don't even see an amount.
Right. There's no set amount for violation, and what the deputies have done to date is if they find a violation, they issue them a ticket the first time. That's only $93, so usually the ticket is paid quickly. And if they get a second violation, then they write up a notice of violation to take it to the magistrate. The magistrate usually levies fines on a daily basis, $200, $250 a day, for the period of time that the offense is documented. And so we have one house that's in that, actually 2 houses that are in that process right now, going to the magistrate. The thing is that the magistrate sometimes will say, well, I'll give you, 30 days to get rid of the violation. You don't want to let them rent for another 30 days like that. Or they reduce the fines, and kind of randomly or based on how much people complain about it. So that there is no set fine, and it's really hard to collect that fine in the end as well. Also wanted to point out that every time they bring something up and it gets dismissed by the magistrate, the city eats the cost of having the magistrate here. It runs us about $800 a pop. So if we're going to put in fines, if people violate, they ought to be able to pay our expenses for having the magistrate here if they're generating that need. So if there's some way we can work that in, I think that would be advantageous as well.
Well, I don't want to mess up any of this home rule thing that's going on, and I don't know whether, because our
ordinance has been in place since before the deadline for having done that. This has been in town a long time, so we're okay with it.
Well,
February 20th, 2006
Right.
is when our ordinance.
if I may though, if we made a change, now, just the fine structure, I don't think was addressed, but at that webinar they had yesterday, they dealt with the fact that if you made a change to your ordinance, that could basically take you out of that grandfather provision.
Right.
So if they come out and they say no, then, that we wouldn't have any ordinance at that point. And the lobbyists, again, are back at it, for the Airbnb companies and everything else. They're trying to do away with any prohibitions against short-term rentals. So I didn't mean to jump over you, Tom, if you need to add something on that.
Well, the issue is, well, first of all, let's talk about the fine. You have no legal right to charge anything other than up to $250 a day. And that's what the special magistrate has the authority to do. So we're capped at $250. On a repeat violation, it's $500 a day.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get them on the uniform citation, the ticket, and then they come for the special magistrate, that is a repeat violation. So the special magistrate can fine up to $500 a day. So that's already taken care of. As for prosecution costs, the city is entitled to that. Prosecution costs under the statute are things like postage, mailing, long-distance phone calls, you know, those types of out-of-pocket expenses. As for the special magistrate's fees, you can't charge for those. Okay. There's a lot of law out there that talks about that, so we can't recover for the special magistrate. Hopefully he'll work faster and maybe not charge us as much, but we can't collect that money. So it's just basically cost of doing business. As for people complaining and it not coming before the special magistrate, well, that's something that we can control. We can have our code enforcement person go out there and do it. We can have the deputy do it. But we just need to give direction to those individuals to do their job. And so that's how we can keep it moving forward. I would not recommend making any changes to your code, because I would not want to fall into that situation where so many cities have, where they've made a change and then they've lost all of their control measures because they have changed their code. So right now you're in a good position. It seems to me like what I'm hearing is just a matter of people continue to do it and we're not really doing anything about it. Well, we can do something about it. So
It's like,
I wouldn't want to use that special master that is not following our laws. And if we have a special master that is not finding these people, we need to quit using that person. And I presume we have authority over that,
yes,
right?
I have not experienced that. So every time we bring a case forward, there is a fine instituted, and they have been sufficient fines. Often what we do is we give a recommendation. For example, the case that we had on Monday, this past Monday, it was the 15th, was that it was not a life safety issue, even though they could fine up to $250 a day. We made a recommendation because it was building a dock or a deck without a permit, or actually it was pavers without a permit, that it would be a $100 a day fine. So we make recommendations to the special magistrate, and he'll take them or leave them. But in those cases where there's not a life safety issue, it's a lower dollar amount. In these particular cases where people are making $350 or $500 a day for the use of their home, obviously we're going to be asking for the highest or maximum fine. Otherwise, they're just going to do what we make an argument to the special magistrate is just a cost of doing business. If it's a low fine, they'll continue to rent it at $350 and pay $100. They got a $250 net. So we always go with high fines in those situations where someone is profiting off of it. So, but I think that we can address the issue relative to more compliance, and that is give direction to our staff and to our deputies to bring those cases forward.
And I just want to be clear, we can fine somebody $250 a day for doing this. So if we see them advertising and accepting reservations for 5 days, it's $250 times 5 days.
Well, yes and no. So here's the way it works is that we have to prove our case. We don't levy the fine. Right. Either the court does it through the local ordinance violation calendar at county court or the special magistrate. We present our case, the respondent presents his case, and that judge up there makes a decision. So on a repeat violation, yes, for every day that it continues to exist in a repeat violation, that would be $500 a day. But if it's an initial violation, there is no fine. There's no fine until a date certain passes. The special magistrate will say, I'm going to give you 3 days to come into compliance. If you're not in compliance, then the fine's going to run. So there's always going to be, on an initial violation, a compliance period. So, but we're pushing it. And I've done a lot of cases here, and not since I've been back, on, these short-term violation cases, but in years past where we have the deputy come in and testify, and we use their audio from their camera, where they just go up to the door and they ask them, who are you? How long have you been here? When are you going to leave? How much did you pay? What's your name? Where are you from? That's the evidence. We've got it right there, and we just play it. We bring the CD in,
I'm the brother-in-law.
put it in the computer.
I'm family. I've not paid anything. They've been trained.
So not
People
every.
are smart enough to, unfortunately, to, but I'm just saying,
Yeah, so it's our obligation, it's our burden of proof to prove the case. So if we can't prove our case because we don't have the evidence, then there's not going to be a finding of guilt. So,
we have an ad from Airbnb.
and we can make those arguments too, that we have the ad, and sometimes that's all the evidence that we have. But we like it to be cumulative, so we have the ad, we have the discussion, we have the photographs of the cars with out-of-state license plates, you know, those, with as much evidence as possible so we can prove our case.
So,
May I, in terms of the administration of the codes, you know, we're talking about a tourist town, and as you said, their advertising pops up every single day all over. And don't want you to get the idea that people are just sitting around with nothing to do when we have a small group of people. And in this case, the one house that we do have it going to the magistrate, they had received and investigated 20 different complaints on that, and each time they went, there was absolutely nobody in the house. And the advertisements are sometimes ambiguous enough that it doesn't actually say this is a short-term rental, but if you call and ask for it, they'll give you a short-term rental. So the advertisements may not show that they're actually advertising. And I have been tracking it myself every day, and there wasn't anything on the usual sites, and I checked a whole slew of them on this house day after day after day, and it was empty for almost 6 months. When we finally did get, you know, continually tracking it, when they finally did cite it, it was December, and they had begun looking into it and tracking it in April. So this is a hit and miss thing. I know some places, for instance, down at St. Pete Beach, they have a part-time person who does nothing but this ordinance all day long. She comes in 4 hours, researches all of the various sites, makes inventory of anybody that's advertised, and then turns anything suspicious over to their code enforcement officers. But it's, you know, that's a lot of sitting at the computer time watching. I was trying to do it myself, and there's just not enough hours. And I'm not code enforcement. I know I'm not assigned to do that, but it's not that they're not doing anything. They've been trying, but it's a lot of time. I just, you know, always concerned about the idea, well, we just need to tell them to do their job. It's not like they aren't doing a job.
Right.
But sometimes, especially because we have the sheriff's office working for us, they're not actually dedicated to code enforcement all the time. They may be reassigned, or there are other things that they're handling. We don't have that kind of focused all the time code enforcement going on here.
And one other thing while we're talking about this, the city of Dunedin has a company that they've hired. A lot of small cities hire companies that do the searches. Dunedin spends $15,000 a year for a company that checks 24 hours a day, 365 days a month, and provides a report to the city as to where these short-term rentals are appearing in their town on a daily basis, or however often you want it, maybe weekly, maybe monthly, because they'll be less expensive. But there are companies that do that, and Dunedin does it that way because it's a lot less expensive than to hire someone like,
St. Pete Beach, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got someone that's focused on that, and then you can follow up on it. So that's another option. If this is such a big issue for the commission, we could follow up on that, get you some prices on the companies that do that.
Well, it's a big issue for several people that have contacted me, and therefore it's a big issue for me. I don't know if it's a big issue for you guys.
Yeah.
If we can get $250 a day out of some of these folks, we could have one heck of a fireworks display, okay?
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes you go by these houses and there's no one there because they're gone to the beach or they're gone to John's Pass or whatever, but I think the house you're talking about is almost directly across from the people that are complaining. And, or maybe it's a different one, not that house. But, I know there's a house on my street and you see the people walking to the beach. And I know they're renting the house because I know everybody on the street. I was the mayor of Normandy Road before I was the mayor of Madeira Beach. So they've got a valid complaint, and the perception is that it's just lack of enforcement of ordinances because they'll get the one ticket and the people are there for 10 days. And my question is, why aren't, if we know somebody's in there for a week or 2 weeks, why aren't we going back the next day? Or are we simply tracking it because of Airbnb or?
I don't think they've been doing that, just tracking it yet. And I know the one that's coming forward, they did verify there was somebody there for the full period and made a different complaint every day so that, you know, the fees will mount up based on the amount of time. Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
I know
apparently
that's,
there's 4 people at that, on your street,
yeah,
and they arrived by Uber and are pretty much hiding, according to the citizens that have been contacting me.
yeah, well, they've,
I don't know, what do we need to do? Have, film these folks, make our own
well, it's,
residents?
yeah, and
I mean,
it's,
I don't know.
it is frustrating when we have residents that are contacting us, and certainly the perception is that we're not enforcing ordinances that we've got. And that's something, and Bob and I have had this discussion, that we've got to be sure that the ordinances that are on the books are being enforced, or there's no reason to have them.
Well, maybe next budget time. Don't need a daily report, I don't think, but maybe we consider something like that, and it takes part of the legwork.
Well, and Dunedin's, what's the population of Dunedin?
About 30,000.
Okay, so it'd probably be a lot less for us, because we're a much smaller town to have to monitor.
I'm not sure whether it's monitored based upon the number of residential units in the city, or whether it's just the time involved for them to search.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
but we can find the answer out for you, and we can bring that back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
let's start using magistrates that do something more than a $93 fine.
That's a whole nother
That's
story,
something we
because I
can't
know
control.
we've gotten some things, that have gone through the special magistrate, things that were supposed to have been done by residents, and that time has come and gone, and nothing has happened on that. So, I'm kind of disappointed about the results we're getting from the special magistrate we've got. Is there any personal or any public comment on this? Okay, next is sign ordinance. Director Portel.
Mr. Mayor, again, I believe one of you put this on here by request. I did not put this on for discussion at this point, because we do need work on the sign ordinance some more, but right now, we're in the process of getting it reviewed by Mr. Trask's group, and especially to look at the legal issues, because the main large, that is, amendment that I brought to you several years ago was done in order to hopefully meet all of the criteria that was set by the Supreme Court in their decision in 2015 regarding free speech. And that had some effect on the type of sign. You can't specify, for instance, what can be said on a sign. If you allow one person to have a sign at a certain size and location, you have to allow other people to do the same, and they don't have to use it for advertising. So you can't specify anymore, which cities used to. You know, it can have this much lettering or that much, this kind of words and things, that can't be done. The main change with that you've seen recently is that prior to that change, we had no regulation of murals of any kind. And the concern was that, and I've seen this in other places, you know, murals may contain advertising. It's just a sneaky way to get around the signage. And you can turn your whole building into a big sign, which is inconsistent with the intent of the code. So the other thing is that murals that contain words sometimes are very offensive And it's really hard to regulate for that sort of thing because of free speech. And so when we changed the code, I added a permit for murals. It's a very cheap permit, but I'm not even sure if we put a fee in for it, but the purpose was just to be able to look at it with them and tell them, it's not supposed to have words in it, before they painted it. And then also there's something about it being or out of community character for obscenity or things like that. And so recently murals got painted, and nobody came in to ask about that or how they should be, or size isn't restricted and art wasn't restricted, but of course there were a lot of words in it. So that was the issue. The wording portion of the mural was a sign, and so the amount of words that were used in those sign areas had to be consistent with what size is allowed for signs in the code. And in that case, we've been able to alter the signs enough that they now meet code, and they can move forward with it, maintaining the murals with somewhat smaller wording area. That's the biggest change that came about, other than just making sure we're even-handed for free speech. Now, there's a lot of this sign code, like many of the other codes, that were really designed for different type areas. Sign codes are not appropriate universally, one set of standards. If your town is very suburban and you've got wide setbacks and the businesses are way off the street, you can have bigger signs people see for longer distances because they're moving at a higher rate of speed. If you're in a place where you've got more of the building up close to the sidewalk, then you need people on the sidewalk to be able to see where they're going. It doesn't help them to have a big sign on the front of the building unless they want to walk out in the street and check to see where they are. So you have different kind of signing that's allowed over the street, and sandwich board signs and things right on the building. So signage, in order to serve its purpose, needs to be reflective of the urban design, the style or character of the area. We don't have that kind of flexibility in our sign code. And I've mentioned before that we really needed to have districts, and this thing needs to be rewritten. In certain portions which were completely unusable, I've brought back because businesses and small businesses couldn't even have a sign. It was so restrictive in here. There's no sign at all, like one by one, who's going to see that? So I think that it's really important, though, to read, when you get a chance, to read the whereas and the intent section of the code, because it gives you a better sense for what we're supposed to say, or what is supposed to be the guiding direction for our sign code. We do need to get more input on this and to bring something back. We are not enforcing it unevenly. Every sign that comes in and any change that we're aware of meets the code before it gets a permit. If we see it, we make it come into compliance. Now, there are signs all over town that have been there, as you mentioned the other day, Commissioner, for decades, and they haven't met this code. It's true, because this code wasn't in place when they were put up, and as long as all they're doing is changing the face, they can keep the structure up. It doesn't have to change. It doesn't have to change to come into compliance. You don't usually make businesses expend tens of thousands of dollars to change the code because you've changed the sign, right? Or change their sign because you changed the code. So yes, there's a lot of conflict all over town, and each time we have to look at it and see when was it put in and what are their options, what portion of it needs to come in compliance, or can they just fix portions of it? And we try to help them work through that. And it's a lot of work, particularly because there's so much old stuff here, and because it's different from place to place, and it's really not serving their needs. What I had proposed, and actually for the town center, there's a different sign code altogether because they're built by a different standard with different setbacks and a different function. They're more pedestrian-oriented down at this end. No place is more pedestrian-oriented than the village, and they really need another set of sign codes. I've actually been down there, and we've called business meetings to get their input, and no one shows up. I tried not to take it personally. We're gonna try a little harder to get everybody to come. I was just talking to the folks at, the Mad Beach Brewery again today, and they had been the ones who helped me try before to pull everybody together. So, you know, we're doing a major planning effort down in the village, the activities center, and out of that is going to come a whole nother set of regulations and design standards for the village, and one of those, I think, needs to be the sign code. And then there are different kinds of sign codes that would serve us better along the corridor, along Gulf Boulevard. And some of these will work for that, but we do need to take that as a separate district too, because it has a different character. So I am aware there are a lot of problems with this. I tried to plug the ones that kept people from doing business, without losing the whole thing, because otherwise you had no standard at all. And we do sign permits all year round. I mean, they come in a couple a week. We are aware of the fact that there are suddenly a whole lot of new signs going up, especially down in the village. Those have not been permitted. We haven't had a single permit request for down there in the last few weeks. So we have been getting pictures, talking to the owners. We're referring everything to code enforcement. There may be some issues with the contents in that some people in the community are expressing objection to the content and the intent or the wording on the signs or the implications that they think that they are obscene. That kind of thing is something we are going to work directly with Mr. Trask about, because it's a community standards issue, which he could define better. But we do want to pay attention to it. You know, other property owners and development group have been concerned that if we establish this new identity for ourselves as a red light district or an adult type business area, it's going to hurt their business, and it can. It doesn't take long, actually. It's like one of the broken window syndrome things. It'll have an effect on business generally. So we are paying attention to that. We're working on that now. So I don't know what other issues.
Oh, no, I actually, that was an excellent synopsis of what we were talking about. Yes, I was the one who put it on here. We discussed it before. I think that this kind of falls in line with a lot of things that we've been talking about tonight as enforcement. And you guys actually brought up some things down in the past. You know, I read through this, and I'll be honest, I know you didn't write it because of how it reads. 15 pages of sign ordinances, and, you know, frankly, it's very thorough, but I don't really think it, you know, you were kind of talking and you're hitting on it just a little bit, the character of the area, right? I mean, I remember sitting here in meetings and hearing people go, well, we don't want this to turn into Las Vegas because Surf Style wanted to put up a lit sign. And this was going to be the end of the world, and this was your broken window theory by 27. I mean, they thought that this was it, right? So, you know, slowly there were some other things that were adopted. And I think what happened was, it looks like some of these were adopted, but they really didn't change the other ones in there. So they were adopting new ones, but the old ones were in there, and you can see why it's convoluted. And yes, you could, I mean, you know, I did one day, after I left here, drove down Gulf Boulevard, and in reference to, you know, the caddy sign with the painting on it, which, I mean, I don't know if anybody could find it offensive. It was actually really nice artwork. But I saw dozens, before I even entered John's Pass, dozens of violations. I'm not calling anybody out. I don't want anybody to get fined or ticketed. But, you know, I have trouble with well, yeah, but I guess we're not, you know, you can't do this, but they can. And, yeah, we just don't, we need to just crunch this down a little bit and have a very much more simplified sign code where, you know, hey, bring your sign to us, you know, we'll take a look at it, you know, if it's non-offensive and it fits the code and it fits the character of the area, let's rock with it, let's go. And I think that can kind of be on a case-by-case basis, have the normal set of rules, but, you know, I just think we just don't want to turn into this completely overly restricted area. I mean, we are a beach town, we are a tourist area. There's got to be signs up for the businesses. We know that going in, so let's just make it fair for everybody. Thank you, Linda, though. That was a really good explanation.
I have a few comments. Is Caddy's in compliance with our sign ordinance right now?
Almost.
Yes?
They were making the postcard wording, they have to take out the Madeira Beach because that extra square footage put them over the sign limit.
I think they already did.
Yeah, they were working on it, I knew, but, and also they're taking Caddy's off the logo on the front. The logo itself is just part of a mural, but the word Caddy's over top of it had to come off. And so they've been kind of shrinking down the area so that they have basically 50 feet of signage on the front, 50 on the side because it's on a parking lot, and they can have a small sign on the beach side. So, yeah, we've been out measuring and working with them on it to try to get them to a point they could meet code.
Okay.
The mural part is not.
What I saw 3 days ago, I thought was not in compliance.
It was not.
Okay. So today it is?
They were out painting today, I know they were.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
painted, it's,
Okay.
actually, the front logo is gone. They painted over the whole
Okay.
thing, and they painted over the Madeira Beach portion of the, yeah, as far as I know, that they're in code now, right, so.
From what I saw, they had painted over Caddies on the front, but Madeira Beach was still on there.
On the front, right. Well, they had 7 square feet to use left over from the surfboard on the front, so that wasn't going to be a problem.
Okay.
A small Madeira
Why they
Beach.
was
The one on the side was a good 14 square feet. That was a lot of space.
Yeah, everybody knows they're in Madeira Beach. I figured that would.
I would like to see our new sign ordinance, besides be like a third of the size of the 15 pages we have here, take into consideration that I think there should be, when I read through this, and I'm thinking, there's not one differential between an advertisement versus a mural or art or something like that. Advertisement is one of the lowest protected speeches. I mean, the Constitution over time says, yeah, we got free speech, but as we all know, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. That is not protected at all, and that is speech. A political speech is the highest protected speech. Advertisement is way down here. I don't want to see Madeira Beach covered with the names of companies all over the place, as I saw on Caddy's. I just don't, we just had this big discussion about their liquor license, how we were so restricted on them because they were in a residential area and all this. I live in a residential area. I don't want my neighbors putting that kind of stuff on their houses. I think in here, you know, we talk so much about how it shouldn't be distracting to pedestrians or to traffic, okay? And how it should conform with the neighborhood and all this. I don't see how that passed muster, to be honest with you. I haven't seen it today, I haven't looked at it today, but that is so out of character for that area. After we just got done talking about how we're in a residential area, this isn't a typical, you know, I don't want to see every condo, every business along Madeira Beach putting up what they're going to call a mural, which is really an advertisement. I really don't. I don't think it's in the character of Madeira Beach. It certainly wasn't what the people who talked about Caddies during the liquor license thing, and everybody up here said, it's residential, we have to be more restrictive. Well, heck, we can't be letting people paint their buildings like that in residential areas. And I know it's on Gulf Boulevard, and I expect them to have a big sign. I expect it to be a huge success, and they deserve a sign, but it's not compliant with what we have here, in my opinion. It's just...
And the mural itself is not regulated, so that's something you'll have to
murals are
decide.
discussed in our sign statute.
They are now, but they weren't in 2013, which is the code that they're building under.
Okay, so what is in our packet? What did I just spend hours reading? Is this our signed ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't a compilation of a bunch of other stuff.
I saw
And I do
the-
hope we address that
I
sign in John's Pass that I walked past and was slightly offended.
Yeah.
Go ahead, okay?
Many are.
I'm done now.
Okay, I just wanted to, just my comment. I saw it. I thought it was beautiful. Because I felt like it represented everything here in the city that people come to see. And I didn't see anything wrong with it. I know the ordinance is not going to allow it, but I thought they did a great job. And the guy did it from a picture that he took. So he did fantastic work. So as far as the mural goes down there, I was all for it. I'd like to see it stay just the way it was, because it was beautiful.
Well, the only thing they took off was the name Madeira Beach underneath the caddies on the side and the name of caddies. So the rest of the mural stays. They're painting it back over.
So they went ahead and left the word caddies with all the figures in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
They did, okay.
Because the size of that fit within what the code allows.
It was, to
Secondary.
me, it was a beautiful picture. I just thought it was great. And I just felt like it represented everything. It had IROC Park, it had it had the alligator attraction in there too.
Well,
it had different
the part
ones.
on the sign that said caddies, I wish it would have said Madeira Beach instead of caddies, because to me, that's the difference between an advertisement and a mural, right? A mural shouldn't have a bunch of words on it. A mural or it shouldn't be an advertisement, I guess, is what and then I've seen them, they're very strict in St. Pete. If you go to St. Petersburg, you don't see a lot of words on those beautiful murals. They're very few. So, I don't know. I just don't want to see this place painted up.
There are ways that you could address murals along with, without saying they wouldn't have letters in them. You could do something about signage related to it. We'll work with Mr. Trask's office. They're reviewing everything for legality now, too, which should be helpful.
Okay, just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this? Okay. Next item is beach chair agreement.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And I'll run through this fairly quickly. This isn't the first time we've discussed this, and I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not calling anybody out. This has just got to get completed and get done. Commissioner Price, to your earlier comment about not having the contract, this has nothing to do with contractual agreements or anything like that. It's more what's going on down at the beach right now. It's been going on for a while. We have a contracted vendor that we have down there that won the RFP for the beach chairs and the umbrellas a while back. I mean, they've been on there for a while. But what's happened is, while we were supposed to clean up the other areas where we had other vendors doing the same thing, we granted some of those folks business licenses that don't have contracts with the city to do the same things and do all the umbrellas and the chairs and the likes of that. And worse, they keep infringing on more and more property and taking away from the contract that we signed a while ago. So we're in gross dereliction of our contract with Saltwater Destination, and these guys have been absolutely nothing but patient while we work things out on this end. So I think it's time we need to get kind of together and fix this. I'd like to make a couple of suggestions. First, if they have no contract going forward, if somebody has no contract with us, no beach business licenses, period. They can try to sneak around it a different way. We just can't keep granting them licenses, because then they can waive the licenses in our face and say, I'm allowed to do this. Secondly, we need a plan with these condos. Some of them they own the rights to the water line and some don't. Whatever they need to do, whomever they choose to do their chairs, it's our rules out there. So no trucks on the beach, and that's violated every day, Bob. You guys saw them the other day, right, John, when you guys were out there. We just can't keep, again, we talked about this 2 minutes ago about enforcement. We got to keep enforcing this, or people are just going to keep taking advantage of it. The next portion of this is the county parking lot. I've mentioned this before. We have a great representative for this area in Kathleen Peters, who picks up the phone every time you call. But we need to get with her and start discussing that potentially for us to take that over. County Park has a different set of rules, they have a different set of pricing, and if agreed, maybe we could negotiate a deal where some of our net proceeds go to fund some dual city-county project, maybe the dredging of Johns Pass or something like that that we were talking about earlier. But I think we need some timely answers from them, and like I said, Kathleen has been more than responsive and a great source of info. The other part about County Park, my understanding, the county owns the parking lot, but the beach, according to the county appraisers, is ours.
Ours, correct.
Right. So we need to get this cleared up yesterday, okay? Because that should be, okay, the property of the people that we contract our chairs to. You know, I know this isn't going to be a comfortable conversation. Some of these guys have been out there for a very, very long time. And it's not personal. I like both of the other vendors, but we're not honoring our contract. And I think we got to get back to doing those kind of things. Because if we find out what I'm saying about County Park is actually true, there needs to be immediate enforcement of this. And the vendors should be out of there in a maximum of 2 weeks to get their equipment off and vacate so that the people that have their contract can put their things on there. Long term, it's better for us because then we can go to the guys that have the contract and say, give us a little more jingle. We're not getting a dime from anybody else on that beach, and we got more beach shares from the other vendors than we do our own vendor because they don't want to start a hassle and they don't want to, you know, break into a big beach fight. So bottom line, we need to get the vendors together, the condo owners, the hotel, and the city all on the same page, and I think that this has gone on way too long. So I'm asking for the board's buy-in on this suggestion of staff, but I'm also saying that we can't be patient about this. It's been way too long, and my suggestion is, you know, we'll give everybody till the March BOC meeting to get everything corrected. If not, I think we need to make a motion not to bill saltwater destination until this is properly resolved, okay? The days of patience on this issue have passed. No more sweeping the stuff under the rug, so I'll turn to you guys for questions of what I can answer. I'm down there a lot. I'm down on the beach and I can see it. But I'm glad Bob just brought that up. If that's our beach, that's the first order of business.
If I may, politically, I've been trying to deal with the situation and just, you know, in dealing with the county administrator's office, even trying to get the park back under city control. So we are going to have some hard feelings between us and the county, and there are a lot of joint ventures that we've been looking on, primarily the pass. So I'll go in whatever direction you all want us to go in, but you know, I've been trying to deal with it more on a tactful basis and doing the research and getting their vendor and maybe even just asking for the money that we've missed out on for the last 4 years.
Well, yeah, I'm not, you know, look, I mean, trying to go backwards on this is probably the wrong thing. I don't think we're going to get a check stroke to us but what I understand, and I could be wrong, but what I understand is there's no contract between the vendor and the county. The county's not even getting paid for the vendor being there.
My understanding it's tied in with several of the parks, not just the county park that's in our city. But I put in a public records request and I haven't been able to get the contract back. So maybe you're correct, and maybe that's why they don't have a contract.
I don't, you know, I have no reason to doubt you that whether they do or not. That's what I've been told. But even if that's the case, what we're watching is first a county park, and then you watch all the chairs just keep going further and further and further out, where these are beach entrances that are Madeira beach entrances that we have sold to somebody else and able to do that. I mean, what do? It's like, okay, we'll take over. I mean, we're going to start a civil war out there. You go take over your land, put your stake in the ground. We also, like I said, we also have violations. These guys are completely disregarding the trucks on the beach. See it every morning. Every morning I see them out there, and it's not my job to go and tell them, but I mean, every morning. I know they've been told before, and they continue to do it.
Cited too.
Right.
So
they were out there yesterday.
Okay.
Well, I just hope that, I'd like to, but I think the main purpose of this is, yes, we need to press forward on this quickly because it is coming into season, and I think that these guys, we should honor our contract with them. If we do not have this tied up by March, look, if it takes a couple months, maybe we just give them a break on their rent. But if we can't honor our end, I don't think they should have to honor theirs until we get this figured out. But that's up to you guys. I'd like to propose that to you, and we can talk about it next week or in a couple weeks when we find out what the progress has been.
So do we I assume we have an exclusive rights agreement with the saltwater destination folks?
Yes.
Yes.
And yet we gave other vendors
business
licenses to do the exact same thing?
Correct.
Well, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, there are some condominiums that do have the rights to the beach down to the water line. And they have gone out and contracted. The one is Sandy Shores, I think is the name, which abuts our Johns Pass Park. And we've had to go back and tell their vendor that they need to get off our beach because they have had an issue. And the only authority for reference to the vehicle on the beach, I was contacted one time. They had an emergency situation. They needed to get on to get some of their stuff off, so it was out of our way, and I authorized it one time, and that was it. All the other times, I know the deputies have been following up on it and citing them when they see them. But we need to go back, and I'll do the research and on the business tax receipts. They do get a business tax receipt for that condominium if they are legally on the beach. We can't prevent that because we can't control what a private beach does. But if it's where they've expanded and they've gone past it before and we've had that violation, then, we just go to the next step and we'll have to figure out what that next step is. But basically, they're on our beach and they shouldn't be there.
Well, if I may, there's a very, very distinct line, the county appraiser's line. You can follow it down the beach. And no, the one that abuts up to Johns Pass, or Johns Pass Park, does not have rights to the water. It's the third one in, the Crimson, that has the rights to the water. Those first two do not. So any chairs that are beyond the I think it's called the construction fall line or whatever, is that what it's called? I believe that's it. Any chairs that are beyond that towards the water are actually illegal. They should be under our contract with our vendor. And I only think, honestly, of the condos, Jay, maybe you can help me with this. I haven't seen that map in a while. I'd say maybe 7 have access to all the way to the water. And I think, I would disagree with you. I don't believe that any vendor should come get a business tax license from us. If a condo wants to hire a chair provider, that should be between the condo and the chair provider, right, Tom? I don't.
No, the answer is no. If they're doing business within the city, then they tell us the locations that they're at, and we would issue a business tax receipt for where they're doing business, and that could be on private property, obviously. So they do have to get a business tax receipt, but we just have to control the location of where their business activity is.
Okay, I think I understand. I just kind of, in my head, I guess, I would think that if they're going to do that on private property, that would then be a service of the condo, and the condo would then be responsible for paying the tax on it, no?
Yeah, they're still doing business. And
okay,
so that's
I got
what the code reads.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so there's, some of them have property to the water, some of them have 10% of the beach behind their property. There's a lot of gray area in there. You mentioned the one the closest to Johns Pass. I do know the last time we spoke to them, we said, look, this section of beach is not yours. While they went to the property appraisal site and moved them back to the line that is there. Now it's very great without us actually physically going out there and surveying the actual property lines and doing all that stuff, which is, if we're trying to achieve a goal, but there's some extents to that. Essentially, it's cleaning up, like you said. If it's private property, they have a business tax license, then okay. But if it's public property, they shouldn't have a business tax license, and And there's a whole, Deputy Snyder and then myself have both, we've put together a spreadsheet. I know we got to a point where, it kind of slowed us down. I forget what the issue was with that, but there's, and I'm not going to throw numbers out there because I would be wrong with saying them, but I know that there is X number of properties, and then there's a smaller sliver of that are private properties, and some of them do have business tax license, some don't. You know, if you look at County Park, it seems like every season they're a little bit further north, a little bit further south. Well, there's a mixture of private and public property, but there's no business tax license, and then there's the question of the contract at the county. So there's a lot of moving parts with it, and we've done a lot of the research. I know us following up on that contract with the county will help. And then once we get to that point, I know one of the issues I had was, as the recreation director, going out to the beach and saying, you guys can't be here, they just kind of, kicked sand at me and had, continued their day. But, it's just going to come down to, the one swift enforcement that we have to pull through. So we've got a lot of this information. We can get it together between myself, Snyder, and Mr. Daniels, and bring it back.
Cool. I just looking forward to hearing it back. I'd like to get this cleared up before we're coming right into season. I think these guys at least deserve an answer on what's theirs and what they're able to make money off of. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the county park, I think those guys actually, they may be on down past the schooner now. I know yesterday they were all up and down that area, and I didn't walk it, but they were down there with their truck too. So I agree that it's something we probably need to take a look at.
Definitely.
I don't want to poke the bear.
Mm-hmm.
But this really doesn't have to do with the county as much as it does that vendor being on city property. And if he wants to subcontract from saltwater destinations, maybe he can do that. Anything else? Is there anyone that would like to make public comment on this? Next is Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I said, I'll make this one quick as well. I'm sure you guys have probably heard that Jamie Ahrens has submitted his resignation as the Public Works Director. I haven't spoken to him about it, but I do intend to, and I hope you guys all take the same initiative, because we can certainly learn a lot when people leave on their own terms. It's a really good kind of a look behind the curtain. But in the meantime, he's not here, is he? Okay. Well, anyway, Jamie, I think he's out in the back, but I'd like to thank him for his service here. I know from experience getting up at that podium and trying to explain what you know to a bunch of people that haven't had the slightest idea what you're talking about is a daunting task. But he was always a gentleman and handled it with class and did it a whole lot better than I ever did. So I wanted to thank him for that. Secondly, I wanted to apologize to him. I hope he doesn't take it as an insult, but I think he was kind of set up to fail when he came in here. I won't expand upon that too much, but given the climate around here when he was hired, plus walking into a Crystal Island project that came in $4 million and change over budget, he was faced with pretty unbeatable odds. So I won't get into the rest, but again, I believe, Jamie, you kind of gave it your all, and that's all we can ask as employers. So hopefully there's a lesson for us all to learn out here. But again, I'm sorry, and I wish you nothing but success heading forward. The last thing I want to talk about, Article 3, Section 3.3, Letter B in our charter, appointments and removal. Neither the Board of Commissioners or any of its members shall in any manner dictate the appointment or removal of any city administrative officer or employees who the city manager or any of his subordinates are empowered to appoint. But the Board of Commissioners may express its views and fully and freely discuss with the manager anything pertaining to the appointment and removal of such officers and employees. If you guys will engage me here for a second, I'd like to talk and have that discussion now. I'm not going to get pointing fingers or accusing anybody, but one can only assume that the top half of the statement was used when a certified marina manager wasn't even granted an interview for the director at the marina. Okay, again, that's speculation, but I still don't know why he didn't even get an interview for it. I hope you guys all know that, where my heart is on all this stuff. I obviously want to do what's best for the city, so I want to run through a couple things real quick with you. And if you all agree, I'd like you to actually echo those views to the city manager as well. From the Director of Public Works, in my view, we have a gold standard candidate. Dave Marsicano worked here for 17 years. His legacy is, and most of the stuff that we still do today at the marina, public works, sanitation, stormwater, heck, even at the rec center, were products of Dave's management. By now we all know that Marsicano was run out of town here by a vicious campaign to smear his name and reputation. It came from a form of a completely misrepresented fraud audit that this commission debunked by a supermajority vote. But that's not why we should express our views to recruit this man. As far as sanitation, I personally saw Mr. Marsicano hands-on assisting the garbage guys. I also saw him working on Saturdays and Sunday. And one particular Sunday during red tide, I saw him on the beach operating the backhoe to remove all the dead fish, while all the political folks were doing victory laps about what a great job they did in combating red tide. But that's certainly not even the reason why we should express our views to recruit him. Construction projects, he has no equal. I won't compare projects, but I venture to say, and I think Commissioner Price will back me up on this, the Boca Ciego project was probably as quirky as you could come across. One of the county's first uses of pervious concrete, and the fact that it's darn near at sea level was a much more complex project than the current Crystal Island craziness. Have there been problems with bogey? Yeah, sure. But I know you know most of the early flooding was due to the fact that we didn't have a street sweeper that Dave literally begged for. I do remember from being out there and being at my store, Dave and Megan were on those streets every day, talking to contractors and then relaying that information back to the residents. And I'll tell you another thing, Dave would have never brought a project to this board that was $4 million over a projected budget. He's never would have done it. He would have gone out and got more bids. But that's also not the reason why that we should be recruiting him, or we should express our views to recruit him. He has infinite contacts in local and county, state government, which I don't have to tell you is part of the equation of getting things done in government. He knows how to write a legitimate budget and how to adhere to them. But the main reason to bring this guy back, honestly, he's unquestioned the best person for the job. He has 17 years experience, not in the public works field, here in Madeira Beach. He's forgotten more about this city than anybody in this town's probably ever going to know. He has unquestioned loyalty and respect from current staff. And I think given how poorly he was treated on his way out, to bring him back would really be a painfully needed lift in morale around here. He doesn't use just one engineer. He creates competition by diversifying, which in turn leads to better pricing from the engineers that are doing our projects. He could do a long-term plan on the seawall without going and spending $33,000. He does the right thing, always. And he was also the guy that got us the $100,000 grant for the pump-out boat that was never purchased. Last but not least, and I've said this every time the subject comes up, there's very little chance I'm going to vote for approval of a high-end drive if we don't have anybody familiar with what one is and how to manage one. Not only did he do the initial designs on this, but he can certainly work with the builders as a peer and get the most bang for our buck. And honestly, if we can't get Dave to come back, we better find somebody who has that kind of experience. So honestly, it's twofold. We get an ideal candidate, plus we get to right a malicious wrong. Lastly, regardless of what's decided on a long-term plan, my view is I don't think we need to hold Jamie here until the 18th of March. Never a good thing to leave somebody in a position when they have one foot out the door. Personally, my view is to promote Megan to the interim public works director. Megan has the respect of everybody. She's knee-deep in any project, and there would really be no transition. It would be seamless. And frankly, it's time to start grooming her for that job full-time in the future. But that's me expressing my views. I hope the board shares my views and that this individual could make this city a whole lot stronger. After ethics training today, he's not my brother, my spouse, my stepchild, my grandfather, or any relation to me at all, okay? Thank you for listening. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, okay?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Andrews. Any public comment?
Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore Drive, Madeira Beach. You know, I think you've all, you've heard me speak about Dave Marsicano and about the whole regime that ran him out of position. And there was some comments that he didn't fight for his position, but I think it was a no-win situation for Dave. He was going to get fired, period. I think he's a good fit for the city. I really think he's a good fit for the city. Granted, I've only been here since 2012. But as a citizen, I have become involved in the city. And I care about the city. And I think it's important that when you have employees that work for the city, that they're not just working for the dollar, that they have ownership and that they have care and they have a desire to make the city better. Not just because it's a job, because it's what they believe in. And I think that's the person that Dave Marsicano is. And I really think that we ought to take seriously seeing if we can't encourage him to come back and run the Public Works Department. I think it would be a huge benefit for the city. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mike Noble, 158 131st. I agree with Commissioner and the public comment. We've all been here, everybody I see here for a long time, and that marina before Dave took it over was a crack house, sunken boats. And he turned that marina around, got it cleaned up, then took on more role as the city requested him to do, took it on, nailed it every time. He did a great job. I mean, he was amazing me what he was accomplishing here. Now, for the reason him leaving, he was under so much stress, I don't think any of us would put up with what he was putting up with at work. We go to work, we care about our job, we care about the community. And that was Dave. He definitely did all of those. I would like to see him back. I don't know if he'll come back, but I would like to see the city right the wrong and make an offer to him of something. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, before we adjourn, there's one thing I would like to bring up, and that is Commissioner Andrews had mentioned the property on First Avenue East, but I think if we're looking at property, have you looked at the old auto repair shop there on 150th? It's for sale, and it includes a house behind it and a big vacant lot behind it. And it would make a great public works facility. And if that were public works, it would free up even more room at the marina to expand the hydri. The building has lifts in it for public works, has a very high ceiling, so you don't have a problem getting trucks there. I don't know about keeping garbage trucks right beside a neighborhood like that, but inside the building, the garbage trucks would actually even fit inside that building. So there's a lot of room there. I just would encourage you all to drive by on your own and take a walk around and take a look at it and think about it, and let's get back together on it and see what you think. That's all I've got. With that, being no other business, this meeting is adjourned at 8:48.